Here we have Miss Laura Victoria Burke, who
Yep.
is a reporter for who do you report for again? I keep
Well,
getting them.
Black Press USA, and then I have a Substack called Black Virginia News. Covers a bunch of Virginia stuff. That's about it for now. I mean, I can freelance for the Guardian from time to time, a lot of other people, but there's a lot going on for Black Press USA mainly.
Okay, so we've got her, and this is Mr. Mark Nicholson. He's an attorney out of Indiana. So
How you doing,
we've
Mark?
got some legal, we've got some
Good.
legal, a legal eagle here to give us some insight about some of this stuff that's going on.
Good.
Let's see. We had George Kaplan, who was an assistant that worked for Sean Combs. And then we have Kid Cudi, Scott, is it Muscudi? Cop Muscudi or Cop Muscudi?
Mm.
Anyway, I know him by Kid Cudi.
Right.
I
Exactly.
know about Cudi. And so let me just go back because these are the people that, we were going to talk about last week, but we
Hmm.
didn't get an opportunity to talk. So George Kaplan, he worked for Diddy at Combs Enterprises from 2013 to 2015. He first worked with the COO, and then he worked for KK, who is I know her last name is Coram, but she is Diddy's right hand person or right hand assistant.
Hmm.
He talked about preparing the FOs, the freak offs. He talked about working in tandem with the security. He also talked about working 80 to 100 hours a week. He talked about procuring the mood enhancers.
Hmm.
He talked about he said he was on the plane at one particular time where he heard a glass crash, and then he saw the aftermath, or he saw Diddy assaulting Cassie. He talked about his job was to clean up after the freak offs because he wasn't supposed to let the maids or anything like that see that there was any remnants in the room. Let me see. He discussed seeing a separate incident with Diddy and Cassie, Diddy assaulting Cassie. He also talked about another instance where he saw Diddy throwing apples at another girlfriend.
Hmm.
And he left Comb Enterprises like in 2015 because he said he didn't feel right of continually watching Cassie and Gina uh, being victims of DV. And I think his father had prostate cancer. And let me do this because I am bad about this, y'all. I am bad about this.
Hmm.
There we go. So y'all can see what I see. All right. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Then we have Scott Kid Cudi. He talked
Hmm.
about he dated Cassie between 2013 and 2014. He said that they said December 22nd of 2013. And I think I have that wrong. I think it 2013 or was it 2011 to 2012?
Probably 2011 to 2012.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I got that wrong. I don't know. All right. So December 22nd, 2011, he said that he got a call from Cassie stating that Diddy knows about their relationship. He went over to pick her up. He says as he picked her up, Cassie called Capricorn. Capricorn called Cassie to tell him to tell her to tell Kid Cudi, but he was hearing her on the phone that Diddy was at her house, that Diddy had picked her up and swooped over to his house, and he was in his house. They said that he said that he picked up yeah, that Diddy and an associate were in his home, and she was forced to go with them. He said he talked with Diddy or called Diddy to ask him where he was and what he was doing. And Diddy was like, I'm over here waiting on you. I'm waiting on you. He said he was going home, and then he realized that he didn't know who that associate was and what kind of issues and problems that he could have over there. And he said he got home. He said when he got home, he noticed that his yard wasn't destroyed, but he did notice his cameras removed. He noticed that his Christmas gifts for his family were open and they were just laid out on the kitchen table. And he also noticed that his dog was in the bathroom. Now, a little side note, something happened to the dog, because they were talking about, they did a little sidebar about you can't testify to the feelings of the dog or whatever with the dog or anything like that. So something happened with the dog that the defense was able not to get in. I don't know what exactly happened to the dog. Did they pick the dog up? I don't know what size the dog was. Don't know anything. But something, because I think Kid Cudi had made a mention, I guess when he talked with the prosecutor, that his dog was a little squirrely after that. So something happened in regards to that dog.
Yeah.
Then we got some really quick testimonies coming in there. We had Maya Morales, who was the makeup artist for Cassie, describe an incident in 2010 about a Diddy assaulting Cassie. She said she took Cassie to her home. When she took Cassie to her home, she called a doctor friend that checked Cassie out. The doctor friend was saying that she needed to go to the ER. They noted bruises on her face, on her body, and she had knots on her forehead, and said Cassie refused to go. She said Cassie stayed at Morales' home for a few days. She talked about that she worked with Cassie. She was doing her makeup and covering bruises. She said she did a video with Wiz Khalifa. What was that? Black and Yellow. And there was some picture that she did, or poster that she had on her website that shows Cassie, but that was also during the time when she had a black eye and how she covered her makeup. And she also talked about, that's what she talked about. The interesting thing I had about her was that the defense brought up the fact that she had talked to a lot of different news outlets, and about she got paid for it sounded like to me that they were saying that she got paid for all her interviews. She said she didn't get paid for her interviews, but she did get paid for the picture of Cassie that was taken with her makeup and stuff like that. I think she said she got paid $1,000. And then these were very quick but interesting. We had Frederic Zemmour. He was the general manager of the, and I hope I'm saying this right, the Elma Hermitage Hotel in LA. He testified that the account with the hotel started as Sean Combs or Bad Boy Entertainment, and he talked about the stipulations for the room. He talked about that once they left the room had to be taken offline because they had to do a deep cleaning. He also talked about that they had like a certain amount of money on hand that they had to get permission from either KK or whoever it was to be able to pay. But they talked about that someone in the hotel had to be walking back and forth in front of the room or the suite, wherever they at, and spraying air freshener and stuff like that, because any odor that was wafting out of the room, they didn't want it to waft out into the hallway. They also talked about that during the time that they were book the stay there, that the name would change from being Sean Combs, the Bad Boy, to Frank Black, Frank White, and then it ended with somebody named Lopez. And then real quick and sweet, they had Agent Croft. He was a special agent with he was working with Homeland Security in their computer department. He talked about he pulled data from 3 of Cassie's devices. He said one device he couldn't pull any data from because it wouldn't turn on. All right. Now, is there anything special about any of those witnesses that stood out to you or anything like that?
Yeah, for me, I would like to go back to Dr. Don Hughes and kind of talk a little bit about this is what happens in a lot of domestic violence type cases where they will bring in an expert that has not even talked to this, alleged victim. And this expert will get in there and talk about this is what happens in these abusive relationships. But there's also a rule called 404B, which talks about prior bad acts that, I'm supposed to be able to get this in. And this is a way for the government to basically talk about all this stuff that may have not even come into evidence. So when you get in and you say that someone that's a victim of abuse, they go through this, they they go through this cycle of abuse. They go through, you know, where they're abused and they end up coming back through the abuse and going back to their abuser, post-traumatic stress disorder, all this stuff here. But you've never even examined this person that you say is suffering from that. So what happens is jurors hear that information and kind of like what you were talking about, Pam, then they understand it and they apply it to the person that's supposed to be the alleged victim, even when there's not being a clinical diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's not really a diagnosis of circle of violence that they'll sometimes talk about. So that's why most defense attorneys will want that information kept out, because like, how can you get in there and infect the jury with this information, this prejudicial information, when you don't even know if it applies to her at all because you never even examined her?
Right. Yeah. So, and that was interesting when I heard that they were trying to get that information struck out. And I hear what you're saying is because it would be different if she had actually interviewed her or even done an assessment. Right. At least she would have had an opportunity to talk with her. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other witness in that bunch that stood out to you?
I would say Kid Cudi. I mean, this conversation in which he says it was relayed to him by Cassie that there was some abuse. I mean, now we've gotten into 4 and 5 people generally saying the same thing. 2 pieces of witness testimony, one from the Jane Doe testified on 5/29 and 5/30, one from Cassie Ventura, and now we have this. And we had another woman that testified too, effectively the same thing. And I just think with this last week of testimony, my view of it is that this case is effectively over. And in fact, the discussion of why he did not take the plea deal should actually begin at some point, because I know that the bar is reasonable doubt. I'm sure that the defense is aiming for the 1 or 2 jurors that may wince over in the jury box when they hear certain testimony on cross. I actually think the defense did a pretty good job with Jane Doe. As a matter of fact, they brought out a lot of things that, nobody knew about, and she's making a scrapbook for him and all this stuff. But at the same time, her testimony does mirror what has already been heard by several other people. It becomes very difficult to believe that all of these people are making this up. Okay. It was like 3 or 4 people, on top of the fact that we have a video, which I think, it would be hard for me to believe that the prosecution did not leak that video to CNN, because before the case even begins, they want to end the case before it begins effectively by putting that type of video out, which of course is revolting and disgusting, of Sean Combs beating Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway. I mean, that setup right there before we even hear the first word of testimony. And we have to live in the real world. I'd love to live in the world where justice is blind and race doesn't play a factor. We all know that it does. But the reality of it is, with that setup, with all that pretrial publicity and information that was leaked out, and now this testimony, I think the case is effectively over. I do think the case is effectively over. I think they're going to meet the RICO standard. I think it would be very hard to find one juror in there that's going to have some big argument defending Sean Combs, which is what it would require. And that's difficult. I mean, I do think in the background of this, as I sit here, is that it opens the door for all sorts of prosecutions against all sorts of people, particularly in the music business. So I do have a fundamental problem with watching what I perceive to be, particularly in the jurisdiction of New York, a disposition to prosecute Black males. I mean, that seems to be their thing. They love to prosecute Black males. I mean, in a music business where we know damn well there's a lot of white people doing probably very similar behavior that somehow never get prosecuted. I have a huge problem with all that. But at the same time, I think they're going to meet the standard. I think he's going to be convicted. And I do think that his defense attorneys need to be asked the question, why didn't they take the plea deal? I can't remember whether or not the plea deal was, in fact, public. I don't know if we know what it was, but I'm just going to put it right there.
And you mentioned that, and Mark, I have a question for you. How do you think, as far as how the prosecution, and if you can speak on how a defense would lay out, how do you think as far as they're laying out the case? Because when I was watching it as a layperson, in my mind, I clearly understand this is not Perry Mason, this is not Matlock, this is not Law and Order SVU, where they will lay out this stuff and it'll get solved in an hour and a half. But I still was expecting there was going to be an order to all of this, like witness comes and witness. Does it really matter of the order of the witness, or does it matter that there's certain information that they want the jury to hear at a certain time?
So it depends on how the prosecutor wants to do their case, right? Sometimes, they may lead with their star witness, right? And they want to have it in a chronological order because, like, okay, how did the police get involved in this case? Well, they got involved because there's an alleged victim who tells her story and then gets the police involved and the police tell the story. Or they may say, well, I want to start with this piece of information first so I can help build this case as something later. So there's not a rule on how the witnesses have to come out, right? The prosecutor gets to make that choice, as does the defense. When they present their case to the witness they want to call. My view of the case is I do think that he is going to get convicted without a doubt. I don't believe they're going to make the RICO. At least as so far right now, I have not seen the RICO, although the prosecution's point is, let me say how bad this guy is, so the jurors will say, we need to lock him up. We're going to convict him on everything, right? Because what I hear is basically this is a jealous guy who may be even insecure and doesn't want her messing around with other guys, right? So he's being abusive and he has a lot of money, like a billionaire or something. So where is this idea of him running like a criminal enterprise when the focus really seems to be about him with this woman and beating her, right? Domestic violence. And people that are engaged in domestic violence, no matter what relationship they're in, normally they will be abusive. To me, that's a lot different than saying that he's running some criminal enterprise just because he's being abusive. But the same thing with freak offs. If you have people that are adults engaging in consenting behavior of this sexual activity, that's not really a crime. All this baby oil talk and things like that, that's not really a crime, but people see that as that's not normal. Puff Daddy may have an image of being, a businessman, and now they're talking about all this personal stuff. So it makes it easy now to paint a broad brush and say, we don't like him. We're going to convict him of everything. And I believe ultimately that's probably what's going to happen if they keep painting this picture of him being a bad boy, that he is going to get convicted of all charges. I hope I answered your question in there too about the order of witnesses.
And as you said that, I got the charges up here, but let me go back to here. And shout out to Nate the lawyer. This is his graphic or not. So they were talking about these were the indictments under the RICO charge. And that's the kidnapping, the arson, the bribery, the obstruction of justice, the forced labor, the trafficking, the transportation for prostitution, and the drug trafficking. Now, I'm wondering if they're going to, as far as with Kid Cudi, I'm wondering if they're going to talk with somebody else who is that can talk about to the arson part of it, because I'm still trying to figure out the connection. Now, with the kidnapping part, I think, and we're going to talk about her in a minute, I think the Capricorn Clark testimony and plus Kid Cudi on there saying that Capricorn told him that Diddy and this other young man picked her up and took her and she didn't want to go. I don't know if that's part of that, but I still think that they have him on the transportation for prostitutes and escorts for the specific thing of sex. I think they have that. And what do you think about the drug distribution? Because they keep making sure that the agents talk about the amount of drugs that they have found in this place. Does that kind of come up under that? What do you think? And what, before you answer, let me pull up another person on this panel. This is Tina. She judged me real quickly. Tina, tell everybody who you are.
Hey y'all.
Hey.
Can y'all hear me? My mic on? Hey.
Yep.
Just getting back into the house. I'm just listening. Y'all go ahead. I'll jump on whenever.
Just introduce you real quick. Just introduce yourself real quick.
Hey, my name is Tina. I go by She Dressed Me. Y'all probably done seen me here with Pam before, but you know, I'm just stepping in. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Mark.
How's it going? How are you?
All right. Okay.
Pam, I do want to comment about something that Lauren mentioned in regards to the plea agreement, why he didn't take it the plea. I think that, and obviously I don't know all the facts of the case because I'm not the attorney on it, but from an outside perspective, in a defense attorney perspective, one is if your client says, "Hey, I want to go to trial," they get to make that choice. But for someone like Diddy, there's not too much of a benefit for him to really take a plea agreement unless it was like something called like a diversion, where after he just behaves and they dismiss the case after a year or so, because any plea agreement that involved him admitting to these allegations or doing any kind of executed time, like jail time, prison time, his career, his all that stuff is over. So it's almost like, well, let's go ahead and take a risk by going to trial. Maybe we get a hung jury. Maybe the case gets overturned, kind of like Bill Cosby. They find out, there was something wrong or jury tampering or something. So with someone in his stature, I see why he would not want to plead guilty unless it basically resulted in a dismissal after maybe a year of, probation or something.
Apparently there was a May 2nd discussion right before the trial on a plea deal. He obviously rejected it. Who knows? It doesn't detail, at least what I'm looking at now. BBC's report didn't say what exactly it was. But I agree with you, Mark, on that. I just think that what we just heard, though, for the last 5 days tells me this thing is over. This case has ended. Whether they realize it or not, this case is over. And this case is over because of everything as a whole package, not just the last 5 days, of course, but we do have the pretrial information. I mean, there's a piece of me that feels like the case ended the minute we saw the video of him beating Cassie. And that of course, is outside the SOL, outside the statute of limitations. And yet it's such a powerful piece. And what it tells you is a bunch of things all at the same time, right? It tells you this MFer is capable of anything. He is horrifically violent and thinks he can get away with anything. When you kick somebody, in this case, you're a man, she's a woman, on the ground in a place where anyone can open the door at any moment and see you doing that, and you feel like you could just do that, that tells me there was so much more that you were doing that we don't know about. And I think that anybody sitting there, male, female, black, white, north, south, is going to have a little piece of that in their head. I know they ask these juries, hey, have you been paying attention? You would have to be on Mars not to have seen that video, right? So this is why these things are leaked. We had to sort of, like I said, the same thing with a case I sat in trial on, which was, of course, Jonathan Majors. There were certain things that were leaked to the media, leaked to the Rolling Stone. You could see what they were doing, clear as day. And that was nowhere near the serious nature of the charges that we have in the Diddy case. So I do agree with you, Mark, that you're right. For him, it really probably didn't make sense to take the plea deal.
Yeah. I also think too that for me, I'll admit my bias, because after I saw, like, I didn't really believe any of, I was a little suspicious, but after I saw that the elevator video, my feelings towards him, my view of him changed. You know what I'm saying? And the way that he handled it, where maybe in the beginning he should have maybe owned up to some of that before the video came out. Then after the video came out, he's like, "Oh, I've done some bad things." For me, once I saw that video, I my bias kind of turned against him. Is like, this is not appropriate behavior for someone of his stature. I'll make another prediction along with the conviction. Is I predict that he will not testify. That he is not getting on that witness
Diddy
stand.
is getting on that stand, attorney. He is getting on that stand.
All right, well, you're gonna have to have his back, Pam, to find out who was right, because I'm telling you, that guy has nothing favorable to say. I would be shocked. If he takes a witness stand.
I think he's got to take the witness stand. Got to take.
Diddy is taking that stand. Sean Combs, just because of who he is not about to go down without telling his side of the story. He's getting on that stand.
Yeah. You look at it, life in prison versus getting on the stand. I mean, get on the stand. And I also think, I think somebody said this. I think Mark, you probably said this, was, other than a mistrial, like if they can get a mistrial, if they can get some sort of technicality, but he's got to get on that witness stand and say something. You got to say something explaining some of the stuff that we're hearing that sounds absolutely crazy. And in fact, if true, is crazy. I mean, so you've got to say something. I mean, he's got to pull an Abercrombie and Fitch, whatever. I was crazy. I was out of my mind. I was on drugs, whatever it's going to be. You need to pull that pin, because this thing of not getting on the stand, that tells me, if I'm a juror sitting there, you are guilty if you didn't get on the stand. You're telling us you didn't do this. You pled not guilty, but you're not getting on the stand. Hell no. Hell no. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, see, that's what the rules, the Constitution and the rules say, that you're not supposed to, hold that against them. I know people are human, and they will, but they're not supposed to hold that against them if they don't take the witness stand. And I think his problem with getting on the witness stand is the evidence is so damaging. How do you explain away, you abusing her? How do you explain away like the drugs and the freak and things like that? Like, there's not really an explanation, and he can't use that he was crazy, because they would have to file an insanity defense, guilty but mentally ill, or something like that. So saying that you're out of your mind, none of that is they can't use that a defense, because they didn't file for it.
Well, the other side always thinks they can explain away anything. Somebody stays with somebody for 11 years. Okay, let's get a psychologist out here to explain how somebody stayed for 11 years and set up stuff and set up FOs and did all this other stuff that she's tested, that has been now verified in court. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that was going to be verified in court, that she was part of the setup of some of these events, right? I was surprised by that. So you can explain away anything, but you got to try. You can't think that the people are going to telepathically think anything. You got to put it out there. You got to tell a story. That's what they're doing. They're telling a story. They're telling a narrative. This guy is crazy. And in this country, given the fact that the defendant is a black male, it is very easy to tell that narrative, because so much is built into the ether of stereotype. I mean, you can very easily build these narratives, right? So, I mean, that's what what a surprise. 6 white women who are prosecutors are building a narrative of a black male is crazy. But that doesn't exclude the fact that it may all be true, right? I mean, it may be stereotypical and it may be true. And quite frankly, with the testimony that we're hearing, it sure as hell sounds true, because all of these people would have to see. I'm problematic when I hear 5-6 people tell the same general story, right? That really, I mean, you could say they have something to do with each other, but really they don't. They don't have any real reason per se. I do have a problem with Jane Doe's. Okay. I mean, if we're going to Jane Doe testimony only in sexual violence cases, to me, we should do what we do with drug courts and have sex courts. We should have a special court where people can be anonymous, where maybe both parties can be anonymous. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is true, the minute this is in the paper, your reputation is pretty much over. Unless you come back with some real huge stuff. We'll see what happens with Smokey Robinson, but it's hard to come back from these types of allegations. So once they become public, and most of them are Jane Doe's, so that person has no risk. They can put out whatever. I think the Jay-Z Jane Doe is a liar. I think that's been proven that she's a liar. Okay, I think what we know right now tells you that was all nonsense. I mean, what we know now. Maybe something happens next week. But again, if we're going to do special secrecy for certain witnesses for certain crimes, we should have a special court for these specific crimes. Because I think it's problematic that somebody can anonymously destroy somebody's reputation. Forget about Diddy for just a second. Just in general, file a civil or criminal, but usually civil case. Everybody's reading it. It goes around the world. That thing with Jay-Z went around the world. And then we found out, whoops, we found out now all these details that say, uh-oh. So I have a huge problem with all of that. But at the same time, we're getting testimony from human beings under oath in a courtroom. It is very consistent. And I'm having trouble believing that, oh my goodness, this is all not true. It sounds about right. And then we got a video of this guy beating somebody in a hallway like a dog. So you can't tell me that doesn't all link up to something that most of these jurors are going to say, wait a minute, there's something here, and he's guilty.
Okay, let's move forward a little bit. Let me get Capricorn Clark, in my opinion, out of all the witnesses, even Cassie, I thought her testimony was quite compelling. And I do believe that the defense kind of made a little blunder when they pulled out that little statement talking about, see, you wanted him to, in 2024, you wanted him to sign this recommendation. So you were trying to get the job. And then we find out, there was a settlement. And then we're also finding not only did she have a settlement, Mia, that's her pseudonym, had a settlement. All of these people, Cassie had a settlement. I don't think any of the two assistants that went on the first week, I don't think that they had any settlement going on. And then we hear from but what do you all think about Capricorn Clark's testimony? Because her testimony kind of rounded out, because it seems like, and maybe for me, listening to what people were reading the testimony from inner city press, looking at what CNN and NBC was reporting, and then listening to the people that were in the courtroom reporting. It seems like Capricorn Clark's testimony resonated with a lot of people. Her testimony resonated. So I'll just read hers really quick. She testified that he repeatedly threatened her life. Now, Capricorn Clark worked with Diddy from, I think, 2004 up into 2011 or 12. She said that she was an intern at Def Jam, and then she worked with Death Row, and then she went into work. A headhunter recruited her. And see, there's always these little itsy bitsy things that I keen into that nobody else does. But Mia talked about someone like a headhunter had got her to be able to blah, 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 fill out the application or whatever to go work for Diddy. But anyway, for Capricorn Clark, she said she went to work with Bad Boy, and she said like that first week or so that she worked there, they went down to Central Park, and he was kind of threatening her then in a ha ha he he but really serious kind of way, simply because she worked with Death Row Records. She said, well, I thought because y'all looked at my resume and there was a headhunter that, that recruited me, that you all knew that I worked for Death Row Records. She also talked about a time that she was accused of stealing jewelry. Now, I couldn't really figure out that whole situation. It just sounded like there was some jewelry that was loaned to him. And then I couldn't figure out if she was supposed to be taking the jewelry, or did she go pick the jewelry up from the room? Because I can't figure out where the jewelry went missing. But anyway, the jewelry goes missing. And then she testifies that for 5 days straight, that she is being, Uncle Paulie took her to the Bad Boy Enterprises office before it was done. They took her there, and she was there for 5 days having to take a lie detector test. Then she testified that, she worked typically the 20-hour days. Now, the thing about the assistants, they all are consistent with working those many hours. I don't know. Does that fall into this forced labor or something? Because it seems kind of odd. I mean, I know people who've had personal assistants, but they usually have a certain type of break. But to work 20 hours straight bothers me. She talked about her job, setting up the hotel rooms, and pretty much if you were a personal assistant, you cleaning up after the freak offs was part of what you were supposed to do. Let me see. She talked about the 2012, and then she talked about an incident with on Star Island where she had been working and she had made mention to the chef. And if I understand correctly, it was the same chef that David James had an issue with, Puff had an issue with. And then now she's saying that that particular chef told P. Diddy, hey, she's complaining about working here. And he basically physically pushed her out of the house or pushed her out of the door. She also talked about the incident of Kid Cudi. She talked about, yeah, that was it. She talked about the kidnapping. She says, which was interesting because I'm surprised she didn't sue her gated community for the for the security guard letting Puff Daddy into the community to come in. But anyway, she's testified that he came to her door. He was knocking on the door. He was agitated. She said he had a pew pew. She said he asked her where did she, who is Scott or whatever. They go to Kid Cudi's house. She says she doesn't want to go, but she says him, and I think it was D-Rock. There you go. In the Hollywood Hills. She said that he stated that he was going to pew him from the timeline. And he was upset that he found out that she knew that that Cassie was dating Kid Cudi, because she also testified that she took Cassie to the Best Buy to get her a burner phone because Cassie acted like she was clueless about the fact of texting Kid Cudi on the company phone, because the phones, everything that she had belonged to the company. And she's like, you can't text him on a company phone. What are you doing? And she's just like, oh, I didn't know. And but anyway, they go to Kid Cudi's house. She says she sees them go into the home. She doesn't know what happened. And that's when she makes her telephone calls. So for me, her testimony resonated more so with me as far as the kidnapping charge. What are you all thinking?
I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Capricorn has been a star witness so far. She's tied together so many things. If you believe her testimony, I think Cassie was always going to be a foundational witness. People thought she was going to be the star witness. I think so far Capricorn has really opened this case up to RICO, because you have so many things that Capricorn has experienced. You got the forced labor, you got the kidnapping. She was semi knowledgeable about the arson. So if the jury believes her, I mean, I think she has been like the most damning witness so far to his case, I believe.
I do too. I think Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that her testimony, because talking about leaking information, when Lauren was talking about that earlier, and there was a leak of this the elevator tape, a hotel. This information, I don't think it was there. I wasn't aware of it. It was, that they kind of kept tight, right? So they got somebody that's really on the inside that is out here saying all this stuff about his behavior, his actions, that doesn't really seem like she has any, reason to lie. Sometimes people don't necessarily have a reason to lie. They just lie because that's how they are. They're doing it for their own personal reason. But her testimony seems really to be like, hey, I work for him. This is the kind of stuff that he had us doing. I think her testimony, I think for me, it was surprising to hear or, read whatever her testimony and learn about someone on the inside saying that. I don't know how many more shoes are going to drop of people that are kind of like on the inside that, have this kind of powerful information. But the way that the government has built the case by kind of, starting off with her and people like, I don't know if she's really, and then building up, and now they got somebody on the inside saying this. I agree, that's been pretty powerful and damaging to him. But in the end, what does it matter if Trump's going to go ahead and give him a pardon? So,
and also too, I think not only her, but one of those security guards is very, in my opinion, very instrumental to the case, because they were the ones that were having all the, I mean, when you talk about privy to any and everything that he was doing, if we can get one of those security guards, they were privy to any and everything that Puff Daddy was doing. They were, you talk about having the inside scoop. They were very privy to that.
I'm so surprised Roger Bonds has not been called. I think they may not call Roger Bonds because Roger Bonds don't like Puff. He doesn't like Puff. But Roger Bonds also kind of stayed in contact with Puff to kind of help him with the legal situation with his son. So I don't know if the feds feel like if we call Roger Bonds, which was one of the security members, it would then open him up to saying, well, oh, you're only testifying because Puff wouldn't help you with your son. But he's been named several times and he does not like Puff. So
yeah, if they can pull one of those security guards, is the Uncle Polly, is he still here or has he been pruned from the timeline? Because Uncle Polly sounds like somebody that was on a reality show years ago. Because I'm thinking
they're all here.
They're all here? Okay. Because I know one of them is not here. Was it the D-Rock?
You know what? I thought D-Rock passed away, but he's still here.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because Uncle Polly, when I heard that, the first thing I thought about was this big, tall, big white guy with curly hair. Because that's the person that I was thinking in my head, because it seems like I remember an Uncle Polly off of some type of reality show. Not really sure, but it seems like I remember an Uncle Polly off a reality show. And also Capricorn Clark, because I had been talking through my whole videos. I never knew her name, but you remember that it was a reality show talking about finding Diddy an assistant or something like that. And she was the person. Yeah. She was the person that I had been talking about in all my videos. Like, there was this one assistant that got up there and was talking about all the stuff that you needed to do to be an assistant for Diddy. And lo and behold, when I saw her face, I was like, that's her. That's her. She had her hair, straight, or she had her hair, whatever. But I said, that's her. When I saw the pictures of her, I said, that is her. So the person who I thought maybe had some information actually was the person that had a lot of the information. So let's continue, because we talked about Capricorn Clark. Then we had Christopher Ignacio. He was the police officer. Now he connects Diddy being at Kid Cudi's place with all those different things. Now he's a separate witness that connects it, because he was astute enough to get a license plate number. But he talked about, going in and all of that other stuff. And then, now y'all explain this to me, because these newer people, I didn't write all my information, and I do apologize for that. But Lance Jimenez from the LA Fire Department, because when he testified, they were talking, Diddy's team was wanting to get a mistrial. So help me through this. So he was testifying about the Molotov cocktail. Now, am I understanding this correctly, that there were fingerprints? Because I know they talked about female DNA, but did he say that there were fingerprints and then there was a fingerprint card made and then someone ordered it to be destroyed, or it was lost? Y'all help me with that, because that was that when they were talking about, we wanted to get a mistrial, I was confused. So y'all help me out with that.
So with that testimony, what happens is when the prosecution in a case tries to, once again, this legal argument called like 404B, and they're trying to interject things or do what's called speculation to make the person look even worse. That's what happened here, because the prosecution, it sounded like they were trying to argue that that this fingerprint that would have maybe shown that Puff Daddy was involved, that it was destroyed, and that Puff Daddy had it destroyed. So they were trying to make this kind of connection implied this kind of connection. So the jury was like, "Oh, we had." So sometimes at trial, matter of fact, a trial I just did, I'm asking about this body cam. And I'm like, the officers wearing body cam, but we don't have the body cam footage. And the prosecutor says, "Judge," or no, ask the witness, "Will we disclose this to the defense?" And they said it in front of the jury. And I'm like, "Judge, they did not give us this, right?" And that was basically what's called burden shifting, because now you're trying to say that because we disclosed this to you, that you have it and you have to submit it. And so if the fingerprints are destroyed or whatever, it's not on the defense's job to try to produce these fingerprints or even say, "Hey, Puff Daddy didn't destroy him." It's the government's job to prove that he did. And so that's why I think they moved for the mistrial. It was denied because, and I don't know if that was right decision for the judge, but I know as a defense attorney, I don't like it when the prosecution implies bad behavior on my client in a way that makes what Puff Daddy have to testify to say, "No, I didn't destroy him." Now it takes away his Fifth Amendment right to be silent. So I'm not a fan of when they do that kind of stuff, and maybe the mistrial should have been granted, but they rarely are anyway.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So then
hope I wasn't too technical with all that.
No, it made sense to me because I was confused. I was like, well, what is going on? Because in my layperson blame, the very first thing I thought about was Little Rod's lawsuit. When Little Rod was talking about an incident that happened at a recording studio, some friend of one of Diddy's sons got pew-pewed. And they decided to take him outside and say that it was a drive-by or something like that. And he mentioned that one of the people in his security team had a good relationship with the LAPD and that they didn't go into the studio to watch it, but he took these pictures of the aftermath of this. And that's what made me think about that. Because when they were talking about the fingerprint card went away, the first thing I thought about was that particular lawsuit and that particular incident. And I didn't know if the defense thought about that, but I was just confused. Like, well,
yeah, that's a good analogy. Like, right, and you got somebody has that much money, and we already know that some officers are corrupt, especially when it comes to like killing us. So you pay the right one off, maybe things will come up. I mean, the videotape of the hotel that came up missing for what was it, 10 years or how many years? That was so-called missing until someone, may have got paid more money, whatever, to make it reappear, but yeah.
Well, that was the security guard. Now, the security guard, thank goodness. I mean, I still thought it was a little shady as his reasonings why he did it, but thank goodness that he did it because he copied it on his iPhone. And so he had a copy of it. And then couple of days later, when he said he came back to work, it was wiped off the server. But he also mentioned too that Diddy had bribed him for $50,000 to $100,000. All right, here we go. So that
hold on, let me tell you why that was going to go down a real. Look, they was about to open a crazy door because it is well known during the Biggie and Tupac era. When Puff used to go to the West Coast, he used to have members of the LAPD, a part of his security, and he had the Crips. They was walking around a very tight rope, and that kind of also goes back to what Attorney Mark says. If he gets on that stand, oh wow, the door is open. All he has to do is say the wrong thing, and everything can lead down this crazy path. And what was smart about this whole DNA fingerprint thing, I was reading the motion the day before, and his team was working really hard about getting that female DNA brought in. They were trying to keep it out because the prosecution was trying to keep it out because they're like, oh, it's just a partial, we don't really have enough information to go down it. So the judge was like, no, they can talk about it. So to me, the prosecution was like, I got to find a way to get in front of this. So them insinuating so the fingerprint card just went missing. 6 months. Is that normal? Isn't that suspicious? So I understand why his team was like mistrial, because that was a crazy insinuation, but it's not unheard of, because we have Mia who says, I got out of a speeding ticket because I told the police I work for Puff.
All right, we have Blue Manati. Just introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are.
What's up, everybody? I'm Blue Manati from Blues House, man. What's up, distinguished panel? How y'all doing?
How you doing?
Doing well.
Great.
Good.
Yeah,
I watch Mark. I be watching Mark. I know Mark. Yeah.
Hey,
I know Mark. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Been busy, but I'm glad that Pam called me out to come on the show, and so and I had some time to do it, so it worked out well.
Great.
Glad to have you here, my
that
dear.
interests me, because again, when they started talking about that was the first thing that hit my head. I was like, they don't want anybody to talk about these ties, because who was the person that is on trial or pled guilty for the pruning of the timeline of Tupac? Didn't he mention
Keefy D? Yeah.
Didn't he mention Diddy and his involvement? But I don't know if they were going to prosecute him for that or not. But I was that was the first thing that hit. I was like, okay. The next witness we have is Didnt Nash. Now, he was the stylist for Cassie. He had a lot of information, and he was very willing to spill a lot of that information, even when the judge had to admonish him to wait till he was asked a question. So if you all are familiar with him, because I'm just going to give the smallest blurb, he was a stylist. He talked about the incident between Mia, him, and Cassie and Diddy, where that big gash that Cassie had in her eyebrow area right up in here, how that gash came about. He also talked about his interactions with Puff Daddy. He also mentioned about his involvement on how she was starting to talk to Michael B. Jordan. And I will tell you, Michael B. Jordan's name has popped through here every week. Every week, that man's name has popped through here. So what do you all think about that? Because I think I want to spend the rest of the time, give everybody their little 3 or 5 cents in regards to Didnt Nash. Now, as a witness, I thought he was a good witness. I think that the defense tried to sway him, but he didn't sway too far. I thought he was a good and compelling witness. Now, according to the people that were in the courtroom, they said that he was very compelling. He was funny. He was engaging. He was all of these things like that in the courtroom. So, but what do you all think about Didnt?
He's a nightmare witness for a lot of defense. When people get on the witness stand, and usually it's officers that do it because they're trained on how to test a lie. They'll just start saying a whole bunch of stuff. You don't even ask them questions, and they'll just start throwing. They'll just be vomiting at the mouth, and then I have to start having to ask you a question. So just answer my question when I ask you a question. And so that's the kind of witness, Mr. Nash, Dante. And also when you talk about someone that's funny and kind of injecting some humor into it, I feel like if you get the jurors kind of laughing and stuff like that, it means they may be on your side. If you kind of try to tell a joke or be funny and the jurors aren't feeling that, then that's a pretty good sign that, they ain't with you. So once again, it's a really bad case for the defense. And on a side note, I just think it's a shame as a black man, as a business owner, nowhere near on the financial level of someone like Diddy. It's just sad to see when you have that much resources to go down this path. You know what I'm saying? And just, I know for me and people that know my background about me spending 12 years of my life in prison, being homeless, going to law school and things like that, that I know that I have to in a sense, walk a finer line than someone that, their dad is an attorney, their moms are, they're judges and all this stuff like that. They got a history of that. Like people, are watching me, you know what I'm saying, and saying, man, this dude, he probably shouldn't be an attorney. You know what I'm saying? Like how does he become an attorney? So I don't want to put myself out there to compromise my reputation and things like that, because there's always going to be someone trying to knock you down. You know what I'm saying? And with with one of the cases I did, the Curious Case of Natalia Grace, that was, real popular on Hulu and Amazon, all that. There are people that are upset. Like, how could you represent this woman? That, she abused a child. And I'm like, I'm a defense attorney. I represent people charged with murder and misdemeanor. You know what I'm saying? So it is sad to see that Puff has fallen into some kind of trap, didn't get the help he needed. And I think there's a TV show that the fall of Diddy or something like that.
I think that's on Hulu.
Yeah, Hulu. Yeah, it's just it. And I'm not taking anything away from the victims. Like, the people that were abused by this, they deserve all the support they can get. But if it started with Diddy doing this, it's like a shame that that he was able to build this huge empire and then let, it just go away for, yeah.
All right, those of you all that are watching, if you're watching on X, make sure you hit that heart. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. And if you like what you see, please subscribe to all of our channels. All of us are YouTubers. Also, if you're watching from Twitch, do whatever it is you do over there. All right, so yeah, I think he was a good witness. I think he did, he did add stuff when he wasn't asked. He had to be admonished by the judge about that, but hey, what can you do? And to be a defense's nightmare sounds like an understatement. But
when I saw Deontay walking in, I knew it was going to be a problem. I said, "Oh, they finna have a problem with him." When I saw like clips, I say, he is not the one or the two.
The 3 or the 4.
When Xavier Donaldson kept saying, "So, aren't you friends with Miss Ventura?" He said, "Miss Fine." "Yes, I'm friends with Miss Fine." Because her husband's name is Alex Fine, and he just kept saying, "So, when was the last time you talked to Miss Ventura?" "I talked to Miss Fine yesterday." I said, "Oh, it's a problem. Boy, you're not gonna be able to get him. He a problem." And there's one thing I think he said important in his testimony that Diddy's team kind of is trying to hammer on, that, oh, if she had all this Stockholm syndrome, how was she able to date other people? So they asked him, they was like, were you aware that Cassie was dating Michael B. Jordan? "Yeah, I hooked him up." "Did you know that she was still with Puff?" "I thought they was on a break." So, Diddy's team has had this theory of Cassie cheating on Puff, and I'm glad somebody was able to come in and say, "Hey, I thought they were on a break." Okay, we trying to get her away from him. Yes, we all hooked her up with Michael B. Jordan. Run, sis, run.
And she was trying to do that with Kid Cudi. If you think about it, she was trying to run there. But you mentioned something when you talked about when you said Mrs. Fine, that made me go back to Cassie's mother, and how, because you remember when I asked you, Mark, about all these witnesses coming in different orders and stuff like that. But it made me understand Capricorn Clark's testimony made me understand why they had her mother on the stand, because it didn't hit me until Capricorn said that, I couldn't call anybody for Cassie when he was kicking at her. And again, the kicking goes right back to that video that we saw where he was kicking. But anyway, she says, I couldn't call, so I had to call her mother to let her know. Then it's led me to understand, okay, this is why the mother was taking all of these pictures before, because when her mother testified, I was thinking, well, this is out of the blue. Why would she be taking pictures? Did she, watch her undress or something and see them? They weren't very clear. But now with Capricorn's testimony, and that's what made me think, oh, well, she was definitely telling the truth, because that's how the mother got involved. And then you started hearing Puff calling about this money he had lost, but that was later on. But the mother called Capricorn. That's when she started taking those pictures after the Kid Cudi incident.
And those pictures were bad too. You know, I mean, that's another piece to support, you know, like she was abused, which to me, I mean, he's not charged with it, but I see this as really one big, I see this as a domestic violence case with somebody that's like a billionaire. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I got so much money, it makes it easier for me to kind of control you, where most of the time it's like, you know, this one guy and, you know, he may go after the, you know, the boyfriend or suspected boyfriend, but because he's so rich, he has so much, you know, power that he can go after, you know, her in multiple different ways, kind of like the Trump administration getting upset with Harvard, and I'm going to use all these different levers to try to force you to do what I want.
Right.
But, you know, they've turned it into like a RICO case, which is normally used for, you know, the mafia and stuff. So I just
wouldn't the physical abuse go under the coercion, because he was using that to coerce her to come back, you know, the other stuff that he was using, but the physical abuse was, even though it was domestic violence, but it was also used in tandem to control where she goes, because that's where and we're going to be talking about this last witness, that's where going to that Prince party made me think about that. You know, it was like, I told you to stay over here, you didn't stay over here, so I'm about to, you know, let you know that, hey, when I tell you to do something, you do it, even if I have to, you know.
But that's the big wrap up though, right? That's let me show the force and the coercion through the domestic violence. Let me show it that way, because that's the easiest way. That's the way I can get the jury to be sympathetic to what we're trying to present. Exactly. So that's what I think was going on.
That's exactly right. I mean, he's going to get counts 2 and 5. They're going to take 15 minutes to decide on counts 2 to 5. That's what's going to happen. I mean, the jury is going to come back in less than an hour, and what's going to take up most of the hour is count 1. Everything else is a
1
wrap.
and 3. 1 and 3, right? Because isn't 1 and 3 trafficking, and then 2
racketeering is going to be hard. I think. I don't know how to
racketeering should be easy.
I think explaining it to the jury is what's going to be the hardest, to have them connect the dots with the racketeering, for it to actually fall up underneath those. Everything else, like that 3 through 5, I think is gotcha, big dog. You know, like,
I mean, that's going to be like,
I'm a little scared on the trafficking. I think there's going to be some jurors who's like, can you really traffic your girlfriend?
I do think
that should be easy.
Can you traffic escorts that want to be moving?
That's the question.
So, okay, 3 to 5. Also, we should talk about the Prince bodyguards, which I think if I'm the prosecution, I'm going to bring that up every 20 minutes.
Every time.
Okay. In fact, I would have Prince's bodyguards on the stand as witnesses. I'm not sure how that didn't happen, right? I mean, that story right there not only increases the love that already exists for Prince, but it also makes you know that there are people around who recognize something is wrong here. Right, something is wrong here, and we are physically capable of stopping what that something is. I can remember seeing an old video of Prince in the 80s. It was in that documentary. I happened to see the documentary on We Are the World. He had one bodyguard. He was at the American Music Awards on the night they did We Are the World. There's a gigantically huge man standing next to Prince. I suspect that these are not the same people. It's probably. I'm picturing in my stereotypical mind 2 very tall black men, but I don't know that at this particular event. But at any rate, I would just, if I was the prosecution, I'm bringing that up every 20 minutes. Okay, you know what I'm saying? I'm bringing that up every 20 minutes, and that was a very interesting detail, along with the Michael Jordan stuff.
Yes, I thought that was, and like I said, all of those other witnesses. Now, it's my understanding that they only have to use 2 in regards to the
To the RICO. Yeah, that's what that is gonna be so easy.
That's gonna be so easy.
I think they've got the bribery. I think they have the kidnapping. I know they have the transportation for the prostitute part of it, because it looks like it's part of RICO and it's also a separate charge, right?
Yeah. So if you get him on trafficking or transportation, that's the RICO there. Those are your two predicates.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that like I said, my prediction still stands. So I know this is recorded. You know, that he's not going to take the witness stand and he's going to get convicted of all counts. But do I think necessarily he probably should? Like I see this, and maybe it's because of my background, I just see this as really a domestic violence case that they've kind of turned federal because of how much money he has. You know what I'm saying? And that's not to take away anything from, you know, the harm that he's caused. At least we know from the video, whether anybody believes he did anything else. But I just think that this is kind of a domestic violence case that they kind of turned federal because of the money, the reach that he had. And like, yeah, you know, so someone like the trafficking, if you're hiring somebody across state lines and it's illegal in that state, like, you know, it's illegal in Indiana, then, you know, that would cause you trouble because you brought somebody in, even though they are an escort that may be legal in Nevada, but it's not legal in Indiana. So that now you're in trouble for bringing that person in.
And so let me just put this out there to all of you all that are watching this video. Y'all you can't get flued out for all these little things and do all this stuff. That's a federal offense. You can't get out and get flued out to All-Star Weekend and all of this other stuff. I need y'all to understand.
Pam, Pam, you could get flued out. Just don't use force, fraud, and coercion. Just don't do that. Don't use force, fraud, and coercion.
It said you get flued out for the transportation for prostitution and for the sex and having the sex, and he paying for your hotel and all that stuff. That's getting
hotel constituted.
Yeah, no, that's
man,
right. Yeah, because you remember they did that to Chuck Berry. Remember when he crossed somebody, you know, state lines years ago. So you don't have to use force in that particular situation if you're, you know, flew somebody out. You know what I'm saying? Hey, it's like, and they're engaging in that kind of illegal behavior. You got trouble.
Well, just don't fly him out for that reason. Say, hey, I'm flying my girl out, or I'm flying my potential girl out. Don't say I'm just flying you out.
For just dinner and a movie.
And I'm sorry, because you know it's one of the Magic City girls or one of the much colors. They going out there to they make that money, honey. Don't let nobody fly you out, baby. Do it.
That's crazy. That's why he got to take the stand. He got to explain why he's flying them out.
Everybody say, but I'm telling you, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. If I was his lawyer, obviously I'm not, but I'm just saying his lawyers who are very skilled are telling him you cannot take the witness stand.
But they are very skilled, but it seems like, I don't want to say they're dropping the ball, but their defense is kind of lackluster from, you know, and maybe they just don't have enough to really shield him from stuff. But man, the money that he paying, I mean, I probably could have went up there and at least got some of the, you know, make the eyes look some other different way. They not doing this.
I think he's getting his money worth from Westmoreland and Steele.
Those two. I think he's, but they ain't been doing the brunt of it. They haven't been doing the brunt. Well, from what I've been seeing, they haven't been doing the brunt of it.
No.
So I would let them just.
They got to throw some procedural objections. I mean, they're doing it, but they got to really throw some procedural objections and hope that it flips on an appeal, flips on a technicality. I would be throwing stuff all day. I mean, because, I mean, I don't know. I just think this is over. I think this is way over. And you know, if this was a white guy, I wouldn't say this actually, but you've seen, I mean, I just think that the justice system obviously is different for black males. And this is a great example of a prosecution. I mean, I don't care. I mean, the guy it's not that I'm saying he's right. I think Diddy is wrong. I think the stuff he did to her was wrong. I think he's a bad actor. I think he needs to get his ass kicked by somebody's father or somebody's brother. But having said that, I have a hard time believing that he's the only person in the music business. Are you kidding me? That is engaged in sexual behavior that most people might not engage in, right? So, I mean, you're telling me that of all the people in the city of New York, the 8 million person city of New York, the 5 boroughs,
They had to
that
get
the
Diddy off the
music
streets.
industry on the West Coast and the East Coast, and you pick out one person. I mean, so, I mean, if in fact this is trafficking, to have escorts get on a plane and do this and that, are we really thinking that in the year 2025 that this is the only time that that's happened, that an escort has gotten on a plane to go have sex with somebody in the music business? I have trouble with that. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't get prosecuted, but he sure as hell shouldn't be the only one getting prosecuted. So
he's not the only one. He's not the only one getting prosecuted.
Who else?
He's not
R.
R.
Kelly.
Kelly.
R. Kelly. This
Okay,
is
who else white? Who
No,
else
I
white?
just messing with you.
What other?
Give me a rock star. Okay. I mean, give me somebody from some rock group of the last 30 years.
Here is I think the biggest difference on that, and it
Mhm.
is what it is. And when I say it, it just is what it is.
Mhm.
His reputation about doing a lot of these different things, whether he's beating up somebody, whether he is in somebody's face coercion. I mean, because there's even little just very innocuous videos, I mean, of him just being slimy or something, but he's more public. I think that Diddy has been more public with what he's been doing. Yeah. R. Kelly then was more public with what they were doing. R. Kelly was running around here carrying VHS tapes of all of his.
R. Kelly just didn't care. R. Kelly was on some other stuff.
I get the same thing that with Diddy, that they are out here and they're moving, and they think that just because they know the Donald Trumps, because they know all these other people, and that they're doing all of these different things, there's this level of that they believe is protection. Particularly now, come on, particularly when we all felt, and we didn't have a way to prove it, but we all felt that Diddy was the one that pew-pewed in that club, not Shine.
That's what I was going to bring up to Attorney Mark. They told him not to take the stand then. They could not keep him off the stand. Johnny Cochran was like, no. And Diddy was like, no, I was there. I got to tell my story.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also to your point too, Pam, and I see this sometimes, not only in my profession, but just in general, is that when people get to a certain level, they forget where they came from, right? Yeah. We can talk about OJ or whoever, but you get in there and you start thinking like, oh, I can do what they do. You know what I'm saying? And that's one reason why I feel like I connect a lot with my clients, because I have not forgotten. I know that with a strike of a pen, people can take all this stuff away from me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it's like I really try to respect, the people I represent, my profession and things like in my family, because I know that there's someone out there that is just waiting to say, no, you think you can do what they did?
Right.
Let me tell you one example. On one case I had, this white prosecutor, called me a name in front of a jury because I was cross-examining the witness. Called me it twice in front of the jury. They had a mistrial and things like that. It made it all over the news and, all over the United States about this prosecutor that called me a name. And when he called me that name, right, I feel like, and I got to be careful with the word, I felt like if I had been someone else, that prosecutor would have got sanctioned for what he said in front of a jury, right? But he didn't. The disciplinary committee said this was not conduct that constituted a disciplinary complaint.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Now, I feel like if I had said that, I think the treatment would have been a lot different. Like Mark would have had a timeout. He would have got suspended. You know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah. And so I think we got to realize, maybe that was a situation with Puff Daddy thinking like he can do what these other people do that Lauren was talking about that are getting away with it, and think I can do the same thing they do. I learned from them. They the one that, and I'm just using as an example, not saying it's true. Like I learned from like a Clive Davis or somebody like, I learned from these powerhouses.
Clive Davis, Tommy Mottola, all of them. Yeah, they all. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to your point, here's the thing that makes it just a little bit different. Let me go ahead and add this. You don't have a rider telling people how to clean your room and all of this stuff that's going on out here. You don't have this kind of stuff.
Puffy wild, man.
And like I said, and to your point, Lauren, I know exactly what you're talking about. But see, this is the kind of stuff that gets me. You have these people put a writer out to show that you were in there tearing up a room. They go into a room, it's smelling a hot mess. It's got wax on the ground. It's got oil on the thing. You
want to get caught.
You want to get, that's what I was going to say. You putting the case up against yourself by doing stuff like that. Right? Yeah.
The rock stars that I know, they'll tear up a room, but they will pay for it, and then it will just go away. But you don't know exactly. But this is a writer. I don't know if that's the proper terminology or not.
That's it, a writer. Yeah.
But you got a writer with hotels to take a room.
Tell them ahead of time what you finna do. I'm finna tear it up, boy.
And once you start getting these big hotels involved, they writing everything down because of insurance issues. So they're gonna write everything down. They're gonna keep that writer. It's gonna be tucked away somewhere in the file. That's how they finding all of this stuff.
Yep.
In the file cabinet somewhere.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So Puffy out here wilding. You can't be out here doing stuff like that. If you go, my older brother always said, man, do your dirt all by your lonely. You know what I'm saying? If you're gonna do something, do it by yourself. Ain't nobody, no witnesses, no nothing. Now it's your word against their word, and whatever happened. But you don't leave no trail of breadcrumbs.
And those of you all that are listening to us, do not think that we are out here trying to we are advocates for your
I'm not a Diddy advocate. I'm just
we not an advocate for your depravity, but I'm just saying that to Lauren's thing about there are so many people doing stuff, but they have their own homes in which they're doing things and stuff like that. Diddy had a whole building of Bad Boy where he could have done a whole secret dungeon or something like that. Like what's the name?
It's crazy, Pam. Not to cut you off. You saying that would make way more sense. Hey, let me just do this in my area. Hey, Cassie, you know what we going meeting up at after the show? Come on over to Bad Boy office. I mean, it really would have been a RICO then, but meet up at Bad Boy offices down in the dungeon or in my private residence, and this is how we get down. Once you start taking that show on the road,
you wouldn't have had to worry because you could have said we're having a party and the escorts came to come and party because we had the relations of the intimate relations that required bodily touching. Doesn't mean that I flew you out or there was something like that. Hey, I was just paying you money so that he can get back home.
Oh, that's going to be the defense. That's going to be the defense, right?
That has got to be the defense. Now, one of the things that we're seeing too in the law, though, is a big change here in the conversation about consent, which was, in fact, seen over some years, in my view. Because when Me Too first started, the first big case, of course, was Harvey Weinstein. And, to listen to that case, I paid close attention to that case. This particular jurisdiction of prosecution has lowered the bar for consent several times. We're starting to get into a territory, not so much with Sean Combs, but just in a general sense of even if you consented, if you years later feel like, well, wait a minute, it might not have been consent, or I have a twinge that maybe it might have been something different, or I was inebriated or something like that. The consent bar has dropped. There's no doubt about that. We're seeing that more and more and more in these cases. And we're also seeing, decades later, the sort of idea that I didn't say anything at the time contemporaneously, but here I am 20 years later. Of course, they opened up the statute of limitations for sexual violence cases in New York. There also is that Rule 41 law in California, in which we're seeing in the Justin Baldoni case, where someone accused cannot sue their accuser effectively. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but effectively, we're going to see what that motion yields in the Baldoni case. But the point is, there's a growing, I think, sense of even if you did consent. Again, I don't think in this case, this is not a good example of clearly.
But that is a scary thing, though. That's a scary for anybody, but it's especially for I would say black men, black powerful men, black men with money. That's a scary thing. You're thinking one thing. I go into this relationship with this woman, whether it be for the night or whatever, and I think I have consent. And then 20 years later, she said, well, I didn't. yes, I told him yes then, but after the action happened, I didn't feel good about it. So, you know,
and Tony Busby is getting a lot of these
yeah,
cases,
and
right?
yeah,
So
you hear those cases. That's
that's a situation with Blue. What I have pending now, where my client has alleged to have engaged in non-consensual conduct, but all these were delayed reports, and some of them are kind of questionable because the woman went to his house and then he goes into the bedroom and she could leave, but then she goes in the bedroom, gets on his bed and stuff like that, and so it doesn't report it until way later because someone's, you know, and it's kind of like in a situation like that, obviously there's no like DNA evidence because it's so far, you know, in the past. But, I mean, and look, I have never been a victim of domestic violence or sexual, so I don't know how to react in that situation. But in my mind, it makes me question, like, if you felt like you were threatened, why would you, when you had the ability to leave, why would you then go into his bedroom and get on his bed and then, you know, something happened and you know, then you don't report it, but you could have. But I know that people in those situations have a variety of feelings and things like that, and embarrassment. People don't
waters
believe
get murky,
get murky. But the bar, to Lauren's point, has definitely been lowered, beginning with the Me Too movement, because, and that's one of the things I asked the jurors about. You've heard about Me Too. What do you think about that? You know, and before we get into jury selection, because some people are like, oh yeah, I believe everything a woman says. If she says it, it happens, you know. And then I got to fight to get them off the jury because the judge want to keep them off sometimes. It's like, but judge, she said anything the woman says, she's gonna believe
anything.
But see, now that this story with Zion Williamson that just broke over the last few days,
and I knew who it was as soon as they said. I said, "Oh yeah, she's gonna get him." I knew exactly who, because they came out and said it was a Jane Doe at first. I said, "No, that's old girl that the porn star girl who was after him. What it was last year, the year before last." I said, "I bet you that's her." Now she actually dropped a video today explaining it. So.
Right. And so you've got this 3-year, I think it was a 3-year back and forth that they had. But at any rate, I just think that the tactics of, you put the story out there, you're Jane Doe, although in this case we know who it is. So it's not really a Jane Doe, but typically it's a Jane Doe. The thing blows up the reputation of that person. There's a lot of leverage on that person to settle, particularly if that person is wealthy, which in almost all these cases they are. Right. Remember what happened with Chris Brown and Trey Songz and so many others, Don Lemon. I mean, I just randomly I could pick, but you know, every case does have to, I think, be looked at closely. But I do think that the Sean Combs case, I think, is over. I think he's guilty. I mean, the testimony we're hearing is like, you got to be kidding me, man. You know, I mean, this is what you were doing. But I do think the RICO is a stretch, but I think they're going to get there. I think they are.
I agree.
So let's get to the last witness. And that's the young lady with the pseudonym of Mia. Now, she testified that she became a personal assistant of Diddy. She said that she was trying to prove herself and that she ended up staying up awake for 24 hours. She also reported that there was one stretch in time where, you know, she had an Adderall prescription, and doesn't sound like she was using that Adderall prescription as prescribed, where she was staying up for 5 days in a row, to the point where she couldn't see, she couldn't hear, and she got a little, I think she was hallucinating and all kinds of stuff going on. She talked about her relationship with Puff. She says that, you know, he was a mentor. She, you know, she loved him. She thought he was some kind of crooked head alien or something like that. I can't remember what her testimony in regards to that was, but it was something to that. She talked about that she and Cassie were good friends. She also talked about incidents that happened in, what's that place? South Africa, where they missed telephone calls and he was threatening to get rid of her. She talked about an incident that happened on one of his birthdays where she took 2 shots. She said she usually can hold her alcohol, but that particular time she couldn't hold the alcohol, but she does remember him coming in for a kiss. Then the next thing she knows, she's sitting in a chair. She wakes up a day later in a chair. She talked about different episodes of where she was She was going to HR because she was, every time you turn around, there was an HR report from Puff about firing her, about her not doing her job. I think she was the one that sent a whole PowerPoint presentation, shout out to her, about what the work that she did for Puff and all this other stuff. She also talked about 3 incidents of SA from Puff, one happening on the birthday, one happening in the closet, and one happening when she woke up. She did testify to the effect that when they were staying in the staff houses, that her door couldn't have a lock, but the security, their doors and things like that could have a lock. That unnerved her. Let's see. She talked about that incident between her, Puff, Deontay, and Cassie. She talked about Cassie was a sister to her. They say her demeanor in court, that she never looked up. She always was looking down. She was talking with the whisper. She testified to all of those assault. She testified how she was afraid of him. But here's the part of the testimony, all those different things, and I'm not trying to diminish those. But this is what I couldn't understand. And maybe I was thinking maybe they were talking about obstruction or tampering with the witness, because they were talking about when she was contacted about Puff, when they were contacted, said that D-Rock called her and asked her what she was doing after the Cassie lawsuit. And they were also talking about the fact that who did you talk to? She said, I didn't want to talk to Puff because I was afraid. D-Rock called me and told me that Puff wanted to talk with me, to call him back. She told D-Rock that she did, but she didn't. That right there, I was wondering, because again, I'm not in the courtroom, so we don't get to hear the tone and the cadence of anybody about what's going on, and everybody doesn't report the same. So I couldn't get that, but they were talking about that. But my question is, I think there's other things within her testimony. Let me see.
She what got me about her is when describing, even because especially when the defense got up there, and I think who was Brian Steele, I think, was asking the questions, and he was getting her to like describe the relationship between her and Diddy, and he was, she was calling Diddy her mentor. He was my mentor. What else did she say? We were friends and he helped me do these things. And even with the D-Rock call, she was ready and willing to, do whatever, you know what I'm saying? And even D-Rock was like, I got to help my sis or whatever. And she was like, oh no, you don't have to pay me or whatever. So, I want to ask you, Mark, how would that look towards a jury? When I'm not saying she's giving like flip-flop testimony, but it's like, where you know what I'm saying, like, are you on the fence with Diddy, right? Even though he sexually assaulted you, and even when he asked about, well, how is he your best friend after sexual assault, and she was like, I don't know, ask my ask my therapist or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like, how would that look to a jury? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, usually, and we talked about earlier about the doctor that testified, the expert, and so the expert kind of puts it out there to kind of clean up and justify some of these, these answers, right? Where they may be like, well, this person abuses you. And, like when I've had a domestic violence case, well, you want to see this person convicted, don't you? And but sometimes like, no, I still love them. And then the prosecutor will turn around and say, see, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she's still under his control. She's just afraid. She won't even look at him during the trial. One of the cases, the prosecutor, so I think for the jurors, if the prosecutors can, lays it out the way they want to, the jurors will see that as damaging to the defense. Like, look, this is the reason why she's acting like this, because she's suffering from this cycle of violence and she's afraid.
Let's keep it real, though. Let's keep it really real. I mean, in this particular subject matter during after the Me Too movement, it really doesn't matter what a woman testifies to. There will be a psychologist on that stand explaining it away. She could say that I was married to this guy for half a century. There could be notes, there could be diaries, there could be scrapbooks. I was in on it. I wanted to set it up. I set up the FOs. I was all good. And they will put a psychologist on that stand or a psychiatrist on that stand to say, well, this is the reasons for all these psychological things. And it only works for women. If you notice, hey, as a woman, I'm glad that's the case. But I do recognize as well that the two examples that we come up with these cases right now, it's not to say these guys aren't guilty, I'm not saying that, but it is interesting to note that R. Kelly and Sean Combs were both the victims of sexual violence at a very, very young age. And in fact, the surviving R. Kelly documentary, to my surprise, really went into that. So it does show you the cycle of violence, the cycle of sexual violence that happens, that repeats itself, is very unfortunate. Doesn't excuse their behavior, but I'm saying that's something that they never. I mean, I remember I think it was the Majors case, the defense tried to bring somebody to talk about, I think it was like how black men are falsely accused. It was like something that blunt, right? And they were like, no, that can't be up there. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. If it can work for the defense, I mean, prosecution, why can't it work for the defense? But frankly, I think that I've seen so many of these cases now where it doesn't matter what the factual details are. They will bring a psychologist up to that podium to say, oh my goodness, no, the psychological reasons are this. But from a common sense standpoint, you're with a dude for 11 years. I mean, I do like the acknowledgement that she was extremely young when she met him. So it's not like she was 40 years old when she met him. You know, she was effectively a kid trying to get into the music business. So it totally makes sense that she would be swayed by his fame and influence and power, and at her age, not know any better. So that, to me, that's the narrative they should go with. And the psychologist, to your point, Mark, earlier, didn't treat any of these people. So why are you relevant? It's not like they're bringing her doctor in. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Mia said you can talk to her psychologist.
Hey,
right.
Right.
I also point out with Mia, she was 25, 26 years old when she
all of them. All of these people were young kids.
Right.
That's what people do when they are trying to be the predator, right? They're going to get somebody that's young and impressionable, and want they want to achieve this thing. Once you get, I was just talking, I think my wife about it, saying we need to find some shows that have black old women in it, because once a woman gets like 40 years old, basically it's like you're over the hill. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to but you got somebody like Clint Eastwood or Denzel Washington making these movies, and they're like in the 70s and 90s and stuff, doing action and stuff. But women, it's like you're just not there. And so
I think that's a dope genre to watch. Older. I just watched G20 again with my girl in it. Like, I like Angela Bassett. I like seeing all these. I'm just like, show it. If you older and can still do it, do it. I'm down with that. My question is, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, you was talking about them being young. Isn't that like the game? That, and I don't want to say the game, but with music is a young person's game, but it's always ran by somebody older. How can the defense present that I have to be in these areas with these young people? It might seem predatory, but it's not. It's just that proximity. How can the defense come at it from a proximity standpoint?
I wouldn't even touch age. They need to stay away. They need to stay away from age.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like the prosecution even really has touched on, because I think there's, what is it, a 20 or they're 20-year age gap. There's a huge age gap between him and her, but no one's really touched on it. And I think probably because now she's much older, it'd be different if it happened when she was actually 19. When they met, and then he was like in his 30s or whatever. Right. But
there's a 17-year age difference between Cassie and Diddy, and if you think about it, it's much wider between him and Gina, who he had, and then it's much wider than him and Young Miami. And I don't know how the Daphne girl is between that. I remember
about the same age. I think Daphne might be a little bit older.
A little older. She looks a little more mature.
She's a little bit more,
a little more mature.
Yeah. I don't see 50 messing around with like a young girl, but I don't know.
Why you wouldn't?
Just based off of who he's messing with. I'm just looking at his track record. That's all. I'm just looking at his track record. His track record is not like young women. I'm just his track record just isn't that. That's all I'm saying.
It depends on what young means. Like if you talking about R. Kelly young, yeah, it ain't like that. But
they're underage. I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah. And you know, with R. Kelly, the thing that got, you know, Lauren, back, you know, we were talking about doing things and being out in the open and just, you know, just not. R. Kelly was on trial, still pulling people from the line of the trial. When they talked about this R. Kelly,
Diddy the same.
R. Kelly,
Diddy the same.
He was pulling the girl from the doggone line that was supporting him in the line. So
yeah,
like, they just don't stop until they're stopped.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, it is ridiculous behavior. You know, at some point you do just have to wake up. It's a shame that you know, that this is what people do. I mean, it's just not right. I do think that I don't want to blame necessarily the Me Too movement for it, but you know, if you want to have a movement, there's got to be some conversation about, you know, telling women, particularly young women, straight the hell up. You don't have to put up with anything. I mean, come on. You don't have to put up with this type of behavior. Now, it's not the woman's fault that somebody's asking you to do something stupid and crazy. I totally agree with that. So I don't want to put the burden on the person being asked. But there does seem to be sort of a odd, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm probably a bad example because my dad was law enforcement in New York. So, you know, when you grow up with kind of a father that's a paranoid, cops are typically very paranoid. And, you know, if I'm not in at the strike of 8 p.m., all hell is breaking loose, that type of thing. Right. So, I mean, I just think that if you do have a father in the household, you do have a man telling you this is what is acceptable behavior. And if you're not seeing this behavior from your boyfriend, this and that, whatever,
get the hell out of there.
Yeah, you need to get the hell out of here. And so I think, you know, one of the problems obviously in our community is that, you know, so many of our men were damaged and affected by the war on drugs. And when you give people felonies and throw them in jail and they can't, you know, produce income, it breaks apart the family unit. And I do think that has had an effect. I know a lot of female friends of mine whose father was not there. And so they didn't have somebody in their life to say, this is not behavior that you should be putting up with. I mean, I have trouble believing that Cassie has a father and she has a brother, apparently. Because I mean, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, one of these people didn't kill Sean Combs. Like, you know, that's just my feeling.
I said the same thing because I got a daughter myself, and I was like, nah, this wouldn't even slide. Like, and my daughter's around the age what Cassie would have been when she would have met Puff. Like that wouldn't have happened soon as a bruise showed up, or as soon as I heard anything, some type of. Oh no, I'm right. I don't care. Oh well, you know he was violent. I'm violent too. It'd be violence on violence. We can get down. Like I'm not understanding that because that right there just you got a brother and a father in your life who should be ready to ride. I'm talking about
everybody don't have alpha type, you know.
Right. And you know, too, you know, you also have somebody has a lot of money and power, and so there could be that fear factor.
Then we're really getting them, Mark. We're really getting them now because he got the money.
Now we're really going.
Yeah, but you gotta think 10 years ago. People was not thinking like I can go and take Puff down. People were scared of Puff Daddy. And speaking of what Attorney Mark said and Lauren, yes, we should have great father figures around. But the thing about predators, they will find prey.
Yeah,
they are gonna find ones who don't have that strong structure. You saw what happened with Lori Harvey. That didn't last. He probably tried to pull some of this same stuff on Lori Harvey, but they had a different power dynamic. Right. Not saying she's as powerful as him, but she's not the girl from the hood who's 19. And I'm fascinated with your money. My folks got money. Right. I'm not going to be doing all these free calls. I will walk. So there are women that have walked. But what he will do is he will just find someone else who can be enamored with his charm. And who he can bring into his atmosphere. Right. That's the thing about these.
I agree with that. I've had a lot of men in Candor say that they try to, you know, find a woman that's got quote daddy issues, meaning she has no daddy usually. So because you ain't gonna deal with somebody if you know that there's a dad back there or a brother, an older brother. You ain't gonna. I mean, that's gonna be a different look to things. You come home with a black eye or something like that, you know. Anyway. But you're right. Not everybody has.
And that's a good point, too, about the strong women, because as you were talking about that, it reminded me of Jennifer Lopez. That Puff Daddy and Jennifer, they were hooked up for a short period of time, I think. Until
J-Lo might have had more money than him at that time, though.
Yeah, and then she's like, okay, I'm out of, I'm out.
Yeah.
But to a comment that someone made that flashed across the screen about don't act like Cassie was innocent. That one there. We also have to realize, and I'm not saying this is her, but we also have to realize that there are some women that are okay with using their body or sexuality to get ahead. Like, you know what? Hey, I'm gonna, do this so I can get ahead, or I can become the trophy wife or whatever. And there are women that are okay with that, the sugar daddies, the sugar baby type relationships. And there are some that do that, and then sometimes it can go sour. But there are women out there that engage.
I don't get that from her. I don't
know about that. Hold on, Tina.
I never got that from her.
Hold on, Tina.
If we talking about Young Miami,
no, I'm talking. You ain't get that from Cassie.
No, I just
come on now. Everybody said if you know Cassie or in the industry, and I know a couple people in the music industry, Cassie was not about that. No, she came into the game as a model, right? She got with Ryan Leslie. I believe that she saw a come up in Diddy. I'm not putting that on what I'm saying, on anything, but I believe she saw a come up in Diddy. I was with Ryan Leslie. He took me as far as I can go, possibly. You know what I'm saying? He ain't the guy. Because even Ryan Leslie just did an interview talking about how he introduced how she even got started with music. It was on accident. On accident. You ain't even a singer.
But look, that feeds more into my belief of she was not this type of woman who's, oh, there go Ryan Leslie, let me get with Ryan Leslie. Oh, there go Diddy, let me get with Diddy. It to me felt like that she liked Ryan Leslie. She said she had never even done oral before. That is how wet behind the ears this
Ryan
girl
Leslie
was.
Got a little. If he was, come on, man. All right, okay, that's what we believe in.
That's just my opinion. I think that Diddy smelt innocence on this girl.
No, I'm not taking that. Look, hold on. I'm not taking nothing away from Diddy. Two things can be true. Diddy was a predator. Diddy prayed. She prayed. They prayed together. Amen. That's what it was.
I'll say she accepted, but I don't feel like Cassie went into this situation like, I'm finna get with the boss. I think once the boss started coming at her, she probably was like, I mean, okay, I'm a rock with it, but she wasn't Young Miami. Young Miami is like, this is what I'm looking for. I ain't gotta work. Okay, I don't have to work anymore.
No, right, but I think now the precedent was set by Cassie for Young Miami and all of these other girls, because yes, the seed was there. The crumbs is all over Bad Boy Records now. It's all over Arista and Bad Boy. Like, they seeing this stuff. Here come Young Miami. She ain't talented neither.
The dynamics.
I think with Cassie, I think this is, I believe that 2 and 3 things can be true at the same time. I think what she saw in Puff was that he paid attention to her. She was going to use that attention to elevate her career. Now, why she didn't think that there was something odd about a 10-album deal, I don't know. But I don't think even with all... the BET, I went back and saw, and I was like, oh, girl. But all of that to say is that Puffy noticed that, hey, number one, her folks are over there in Connecticut, and they're struggling. They're not poor, but they're struggling. She is using this opportunity to make some money and to do all these different things, even though she modeled, even though she did all these other things. I think she saw a come up, but I don't think she saw that. And a lot of people are thinking because of the sex part of it, and she was a willing participant in the beginning of the sex part of it, then because she was willing, then, it ain't on Puff, but he was knocking her head between the washer and dryer. And if you know anything about PTSD or any of these types of things, those things change your brain chemistry, whether you want to believe it or not.
No, and they do.
You can't go through all of that kind of stuff. And then she's in love with this person too, because after a while she grew to love him because she was so jealous of Kim. She was so jealous of Gina. She was so jealous of all these other things, but she didn't even have it after a few knocks in the washer and dryer, plus you're on drugs. She didn't even realize what we realize now, that all she was his sex worker.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, we are seeing a little bit of a pattern here of everything seems fine, everything's great. There's this relationship, the years are going by, and it only seems to be troubled in these cases when we're breaking up now, and now he's with somebody else, and now suddenly I'm suing for $20 million. I mean, I get the feeling that if these two were together, we wouldn't have heard anything about this, which, you know, you can still argue that his behavior is totally abusive.
Right. No, it is.
And then that was it. But the other thing too is, just as a general, 7,000 foot view of it, yes, men are in control of the music business. This is a business where men are calling the shots. They are making the decisions. They carry the power. They're deciding who gets the money. It's kind of like the Les Moonves scenario at CBS and the Harvey Weinstein scenario with his company. Right. He controlled who would become famous. He made the decisions. There were no women within a 5,000-mile radius of these decisions. So the women are at a obvious disadvantage in the power dynamic. And then on top of it, you're young. So you're not even that experienced in what the music business is. He had a huge advantage there. And just like with Weinstein, I think he leveraged her on that experience. Because what really are her choices? I'm not saying you don't have choices, but what are choices? Either not put up with this nonsense or not be in the music business at all. Right. Had she blown up and become the huge star that she could have become, she could have turned around and become Whitney Houston or, Beyonce and not need him anymore for the rest of her life. I actually think that that dynamic is always there. It's like he's controlling some of that fame in a way that you can leverage somebody. That is so clear in this. And you kind of have to remember, so when somebody's making decisions that may seem ridiculous, like I think some of these decisions, I'm like, you made that decision, but I can see how somebody at 19, 20 years old or under the age of 25, let's say, could get caught up in that decision making.
Oh yeah, most definitely. The military do it to you all the time.
Yep.
Well, see, the military, you do have recourses in some of these places where you work. Might not be great, might not work perfectly, but the music business is the Wild West.
Nah, I just want to throw that out there. But because I'm just saying, because those things are regular occurrences when it comes to different power dynamics. Like you said, it's a man's world over there. There's no real women executives making any kind of decisions to help you do certain things. And you're not thinking rational. You're probably thinking fame, glitz, glamour, things of that nature, and you're not thinking what come with the fame and the glitz and the glamour. A lot of that stuff is drug use. A lot of that stuff is violence. A lot of those things, when you look at the gold and the shiny stuff, it come with that, and that string, you might not see it, but it go around that corner. When you go around that corner, somebody's gonna bop you upside your head. It comes, you know what I'm saying? That's the business of, to me, any type of entertainment business, because 1 minute you're hot and 1 minute you're not. What can I do to keep you hot? You know what I'm saying? It's just a lot going on. And like you said, Lauren, at 19, 22, you're not really thinking that. You just think of fast money, cars, drugs, women, rock and roll, whatever.
Really, why wouldn't you be thinking that? I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars on the line. I mean, you should be thinking about that.
You should. And we ask the question all the time with my peers that, because I used to rap, and I guess I kind of still rap, but we asked that question, like, how come a lot of people who get deals now get a 10 album deal? Like, you didn't just read such and such. Puffy did this to the Locks. Puffy did, Puffy is not the best businessman when it comes to what was put out there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why you don't know these things? You know what I'm saying? Especially coming into hip hop, it's not the best. It's not set up for you to win. You know what I mean? Like, It's not set up for you to win. It's horror stories left, right, and center.
Right. How
do you get into this 10 album deal? Or how do you not know going in that this, you know what I'm saying, that these happen? These type of things happen because of the stories that's out there. So that's a good question. I don't know why they still go in like this and sign here. I don't know.
Well, see, at this point, let's be real. Like, any story I hear after about, I'd say 2005-ish, 2006-ish, I'm like, really? You didn't know that? It's kind of like the stories that when people get taken, they get their rights taken. Even with homegirl that got her rights yesterday, you know who I'm talking about. Like, she just announced it yesterday.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor. Yeah, Taylor Swift. I'm like, really, Taylor? She comes from like a big family that's like affluent and they got money and I'm like, you didn't know that they're going to steal all your music just like they did Prince and Bruce Springsteen and all this. So it is kind of at this point in contemporary society, it feels like you don't know that you could be the target. And that's what I'm saying. Like parents who would think,
told you.
What?
Yeah.
Left Eye told you. Eye told you about that. So I mean,
it's a predatory business. It's just, I mean, and that's just what it is. It's a predatory business.
Yeah.
Top to bottom. The bottom gonna prey on the top, and the top gonna prey on the bottom. That's just what it is.
Yeah. They've been doing it ever since back in the day when you had the blues musicians. You know what I'm saying, making the blues and just get in there. They put their name on it as a producer and all writer and get all those royalties and just pay the person in cash. And also, like what Lauren was talking about, you know, that power dynamic and people not being held accountable. You know, you think of all the people that were involved with the Jeffrey Epstein, you know, and then he ends up killing himself. But all those people that were involved on that island, where you go there, freak off island, you know, do that island, none of them really held accountable.
Right.
Let's address this question. Let's address this right here. It says here, it seems that Diddy broke a whole lot of employment laws, but I'm not seeing X trafficking and RICO elements. What do you all think about that?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
but
it
is a lot. I don't see how you're not seeing sex trafficking though. I don't see maybe the RICO, but the sex trafficking is there. That's all day, every day. Like that's what they was doing.
Yeah, they may not have been on when we addressed the fact that, you know, if he hires an escort to come to a state like New York or wherever where that prostitution is not legal and they engage in prostitution, that can be kind of like that sex trafficking. You know what I'm saying? If he knew that they were going to engage in that kind of behavior. RICO, I just think they're going to make RICO just because they're throwing a whole bunch of bad stuff in there, you know, on him, and they're just going to be like, I'll find him guilty of RICO. But I don't think it should have been a RICO case. I think it should just been like a basically domestic violence type of case. But you know,
here we have another thing. It says, well, I read reports where Cassie said to an assistant that she can't leave Puff because she will be single and Jay-Z isn't available or single.
Look, I took that as she felt like, I've tried Kid Cudi. I've tried Michael B. Jordan. I've tried NFL players. He runs everybody off. He's not going to run Hov off. Like, I think that was her saying, like, that's the only who he won't run up on.
She should have went at fifth. She should have tried to get at fifth. Fifth ain't scared of Diddy. She should have went over there to fifth.
But the thing why I'm a little more sensitive to Cassie is because it's not just Cassie. He did this to Kim. Kim was with Al B. Sure, and he just wore her down. And you gonna be my woman.
He said, I'm gonna take you and your son.
And your child. So some of these, I feel like the women who want Puff, he don't want them. He don't want them. I want what I can't have. That is the challenge to him. That is why he likes to have the straight men in the room, because you have the power to make them do these uncomfortable things. There are people who are willing to do this stuff. He don't want the people. He likes the challenge.
That's what I said. I said
predator.
Puff, you could have just put this together on your own and just called it a day. Why are you doing
these
all of this?
Men are saying I couldn't even like continue doing this because I was so uncomfortable with him just sitting there
in the corner holding himself. What you
go
doing,
find somebody who want to do this. There are people out there who will sign NDAs, people who have safe words, and we can do this all day. He don't want them. There are women lining up for Puff. He don't want them. I want Cassie. She ain't paying me. She ain't paying me no attention. Why she like Ryan? Ryan is lame. Yeah. He's so lame. What you want, Ryan Leslie? And look at me.
Right.
I want Kim. You with Al B. Sure, that pretty boy. What? Like that is just Puff.
It says here, Cassie wanted to be Diddy's main girl, and so that's why she was pimping herself out to him to keep him interested in her as a main girlfriend doing FOs.
I mean, she kind of explained it that way a little bit on the stand. She did kind of explain that way. But it's still, that's why I say two things can be true. I think I think she wanted some of this stuff until she got tired of it, right? Until she till something might have clicked in her head, said, you know what, maybe I do want an actual music career, or I do want to have, have some things out, and this is really stopping me from progressing. You know what I'm saying? I can't have, look, it's my birthday. I didn't want to do this on my birthday. I wanted to go to the beach, hang out with my homegirls. You calling me talking about, oh, it's your birthday, we got to do a freak off? No, dog. No, like, I don't want to do that. It's my birthday. I'm turning. Well, I can't remember how old she was turning, but it's like, 29. No, man. Like, how old? 29?
29. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 29. Like, no, Diddy. Look,
bro, we've been doing this for 6 years. You're not
man.
tired. You're not tired of doing this.
You're not tired.
Yeah, like she was getting grown. She like, okay, I'm getting older now. I'm a woman now. I ain't
like, oh
these
my
girl
God.
games.
But you're right. You are right. If he would have done right, she would still be there. You know why I say that? Because God rest her soul. If Kim wasn't deceased, she would be there. You see Misa is standing by his side. His other baby mama is there. And we all have heard stories of what he's done to Kim and Misa. So it is what it is with Puff.
Does little Kim show up in this story anywhere?
No.
I just wonder.
Little Kim was with Biggie. She wasn't with Puff.
I mean, I ain't saying she was with it, but they were, Puff and Kim was around, each other.
Yeah.
So I just wonder maybe if,
he was running after Kim during all that time. And then here we have, there is a metal band that has a DVD from the early 90s. And on that DVD, they gloat and laugh about, have someone's picked females from their crowd to hang out. And one time they had a mother and daughter. And that goes back to Lauren basically saying that, they're doing it on the other side and they're gloating on a DVD. I'm wondering,
you know what, Pam? I think Puff would be okay if he wouldn't be an asshole, because there probably are people who's done this crazy stuff who just wasn't assholes and don't have so many people who just hate him. I think if he was doing all of this and you kept people happy around you, we wouldn't be here today. People would be like, man, I ain't finna tell him.
Not my dude. That's my dude.
All these, take the women out. All these assistants, from the men assistants to the women assistants, just talk about how horrible you are to people.
Yeah, that is.
Horrible.
Yeah, but to be able to take the stand and not pull a Lil Woody, you know what I'm saying? Is nobody's pulled one of those I don't recalls yet. You know what I'm saying? Which is a testament to Puff's assholish nature. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's got up there and like, nah, he ain't do that to me, or everything was cool, and nobody's done that. So
but
Tina's
even
right.
when he did all of that, every assistant, they respect him. They because the Kaplan guy was sending him invitations to his wedding and wishing him happy birthday. Mia was making scrapbooks for him. Capricorn was talking about how sometimes he was a good guy. Everyone seems to have a certain level of fear and respect for him.
I mean, he might have been he might have been a good manager, or a good mogul, or a good businessman, and he was good for the business, not the personal things, but for the business aspect of their career. So, I mean, you go from, and then it's like what they said: if I leave Puff, I can't go work anywhere, right? If I do try to go over there and sign with G Unit or Rockefeller or whoever, Death Row, whatever, he gonna blackball me. I can't work no more.
And he's charming.
And he's charming. Yeah, he might be charming.
If you've ever watched Making the Band, him and Lorianne Gibson would get into it. I'm talking about, she would go at him. She would pack up. I'm gone. I'm leaving. Next thing you know, come on, Lorianne. Come on. I need you. I'm sorry. I lost my mind. I need you. So she's charming.
Supposed to take a stand too, right?
I heard.
I heard.
Boom cack.
I got a question for the attorney before we wrap it up. It seems like with all this witness testimony, there's not a lot of like physical evidence. So like how does that run into play, where it's just like right now we're only getting witness testimony outside of Cassie? Of course, we've seen the bruises, but I'm saying when you're having people saying, oh, he held me at gunpoint, he kidnapped me, like, how is this all playing into? Are they just solely going to rely on witness testimony? And there's, of course, there's no proof of you kidnapping me. How do we not know all these people are lying? So you know, how does that play into all of this?
Yeah, so you know, you have what you call direct evidence, which is like, you know, this physical evidence you're talking about, or maybe there's video, right? Kind of direct physical. Then you have what's called circumstantial evidence, which is kind of what we're dealing with in the domestic battery case, and a lot of domestic battery cases, because you may just have, you know, you hear people say she said versus he said, you know, those kind of cases. So that's what you have here, and in a way, it's kind of different. It's good and it's bad. It's like kind of double-edged sword, because it's like, hey, they don't have everything. They don't have any proof really saying this. Like, there hasn't been like this financial record showing like all this money he's made from, you know, running all these, you know, escorts and stuff, and beating up women. Where's all this money that was illegal? But at the same time, it's like, since they don't have it, if the jury believes what these people are saying, kind of like most of all of us on the panel, he's hit. You know what I'm saying? Right. And how, you know, there are a lot of people sitting in prison, and unfortunately, I've tried a few cases where I really believe my client's innocent, and that person gets on the witness stand and lies, and they get convicted. And the person, like, how can I get convicted? They lied. But the jury believed them. Right. And I believe, you know, and they got it wrong, but they believed them. And that's what, you know, that's basically what witness testimony is. You get in there and say somebody did it, and if the jury believes it, you know,
because I see a lot of people, you know, and this is going to be I think this is going to be an OJ style case, because this is the first case in present time where social media is so heavily engulfed. When R. Kelly was on trial, TikTok wasn't out. And you're letting these jurors go home to have access to all of this.
Everything.
So what I'm seeing a lot of people is saying, okay, all I'm hearing is people talking. Where's proof that she got kidnapped? Why should we believe she got kidnapped? Or where's the proof that he kicked this woman, you know, in the back? I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure they're going to introduce financial records and, you know, even the arson. Like, where is the proof of the arson is what I'm hearing. So we're just going to rely on, you know, witness testimony. So that's kind of what I had a question about.
I don't think they have the evidence for the arson, because I think they would have brought that in already. I think it's this kind of insinuation that I think he did it, you know, but I no one actually witnessed him do it, and no one's coming forth at this point saying he did it. But like the person here posted, you know, there's that history, right? So you get this chain of witnesses that are saying he engaged in this behavior, and that's the picture that the prosecution's painting, is that he's a bad boy. And jurors make it a lot easier to say, you know what, I believe he beat these. I mean, all these people come for. What's their motive? That's what the defense always try to do. What is the incentive for this person to lie? How can we poke holes in this person's story by saying they have an incentive to lie because they are upset that I'm not with them, that I didn't give them a contract or whatever? And then the prosecution's trying to paint a picture of, no, these people's story are consistent, that they are laying out a good story. Sorry. They're laying out a good story of this man being abusive.
Right. You know, I think the thing too, and I've said it before, and I tell my audience all the time, y'all, this ain't Matlock. This ain't Law and Order SVU. We ain't gonna solve it. Some of these witnesses, you know, will be boring to you, because I think a lot of time, I think the first week of testimony, when I was hearing a lot of people and reading a lot of the comments, people were like, well, I don't know how that's gonna prove RICO. And I'm like, we got about 6 more weeks of this testimony. Wait a minute. No, because she wasn't fast traffic because she participated. You got to wait, because there's at least 2 other witnesses, 2 other victims that they've got to put out here to show this information of. But this particular person says under RICO, the government doesn't need to prove profit, just a pattern of criminal activity tied to an enterprise. It is the repeated conduct that makes it racketeering, not whether money was made.
Yeah, you don't have to prove money. They hit them, like I keep saying, they hit them teachers in Atlanta with RICO. You don't even have to be a quote unquote criminal organization. You just got to be a group of people.
Which is bad. That's sad. That's sad work right there.
Yeah. Proving arson in courts involves a combination of physical evidence, expert testimony, witness statements, and circumstantial evidence. The government proved all the elements, so that part was easy. Who did they have?
I don't think they proved arson on Diddy.
That arson one.
Yeah.
I don't know, because all they had was the fire person come up there and say, because once they said the fingerprint card was missing,
was destroyed.
They kind of threw that case. Yeah, that kind of threw. What they did show was intimidation and trespassing when
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the arson. Because
that's why I'm so surprised they included it, because I was looking for, unless somebody's gonna testify and cop up and say I did it. Now.
That's what I was saying. Whoever that well, anyway, what I was thinking about the female DNA, because Kid Cudi testified that he was over at his girlfriend's sister's house and he had his dog sitter at the house. And I'm thinking in my head, the dog sitter is at the house.
Is she the one did it all?
It was a woman. And could she not have been the dog sitter, but possibly a current girlfriend? And then she found out that homeboy was over there at the sister his ex-girlfriend.
They got a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Therefore, the female DNA, because they did say it was an old English bottle, old English malt liquor bottle with a silk scarf in it. So could it have been a situation where maybe that's where they found female DNA on the silk scarf or something, like, I don't know. But I was just thinking, well, she might have got upset and then called him and told him, Negro, you know your car on fire. You know what I'm saying? Just some crazy stuff like that. I don't know. I was just asking. I don't know. I don't know about the arson.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because when something happens like that and there's not a witness, it's easy that, well, it's probably Puff. So easily kind of blame. That's one of the little cascade of troubles that they get when they start putting all this stuff on him because he's a bad guy. This is something he would do, and someone else did it. And then same thing with the dog. Like, he's over there trying to talk about how his dog felt. You know what I'm saying? How his dog was traumatized, and the defense objects. Like, you can't get in and speak for the dog, and the prosecution throws in this little part about, well, he's no longer with us or whatever. Almost making it seem like Diddy killed the dog when the dog died, later, like years later or whatever. And, but all that
being locked in the bathroom, the dog just lost his mind and
lost his mind and committed suicide.
They threw that baby in the bathroom. Yeah. They threw that baby, they wrangled that baby up and threw that baby in the bathroom.
Yeah, what I'm saying?
Not laughing, ha, but I'm just saying, because he said his dog was acting a little frazzled.
Started getting on them drugs. Next thing you know, the dog was out of here. Done.
Yeah.
That was it for that dog. I do have an observation though. Bringing up how this trial was presented to us before it started. However, I think of what's her name, who some say was lying. Oh, I told y'all she was telling the truth. What's old girl name? The singer who was singing back up.
Jaguar Wright.
Jaguar Wright. Like, the stuff that she was putting out, come to find out that ain't got nothing to do with nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, the way that they presented this trial to the people, and that's why you're getting people. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Tina, about they get to go home every day and talk to the regular people on the street. Regular people on the street was like, hold on, man. This ain't what's going on. Where's the drugs in the baby and the baby oil and you know what I'm saying? Like, so it gets to a point to where, and that's why I said how is it explained to the jurors as far as what to convict on and what, the instructions. You know what I'm saying? Because it's out here on these streets. It's wild, wild west out here on these streets. Now, inside that courtroom was a different story, but out here, it's people arguing, no, man, it ain't RICO because y'all did. And I'm like, y'all need to slow down, man. Like, they proving it. It's boring as hell, but they are proving. They going line by line and proving it. And they not, the story isn't sexy. You know what I'm saying? But it's a story that they putting together. It's a story that they put together.
I agree with that. And that's what people forget when we're getting, like, we're not seeing it live streamed or whatever, on court TV, but like trials, I've had clients get in and say, well, it's going to be over like an hour or something like that. Or how long do jurors deliberate? It's like, you have no clue. They might deliberate, like somebody, I think Lauren said, 10 minutes or whatever. And, make 2 hours, 5. You just never know. And it just does. It's not TV. And so that some of that stuff is like boring. People be falling asleep. And you see sometimes in the courtroom, jurors fall asleep because it seems so boring and stuff. But you're right. They are telling a story. It's going to be interesting to see what story the defense tells, because I believe
what I'm waiting
they're
on.
going to put on a case. I just don't think that Puff Daddy is going to be a part of telling that story. It's going to be interesting to see what story they tell.
He got to get up there. He got to
So
put a
again-
shiny suit on and get up there and say, take that, because he need to take that stand. He got to.
I think they're going to
Remember
do
the
a good
music.
job of showing all the money he invested into Cassie. I think that's going to be one of his defense. Hey, I did try to advance her career. Look at our statements from X blah 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 that shows I invested $5 million, $10 million. I think they're going to go with that. I think as far as him paying for her apartment, we've heard he pays for a lot of people on his staff's apartment. So it wasn't like I'm just paying for her apartment so I can have control over her. I do this for everybody. So they're going to have a couple little things to kind of, is it going to be enough?
Is it enough? That's and I was just about to say, is that enough? I don't know if that's enough.
I don't know if that's enough, but I will tell, like I said, I tell you all this. Everybody, even myself, and when you mentioned Jaguar Wright, this is where I was coming from, because she was out here talking about, she was talking to people, the girls that were trafficking.
I'm saving girls,
and I'm saving people from the freak off. It wasn't what we thought. We thought it was people went to the white party. And then they got invited to the after party. Then they got invited to the hotel lobby. And then from them select few, they got invited upstairs to the freak off. And that's not what the freak off, that was between Cassie
and Diddy. Or Diddy and whoever his intimate partner was. That's what I think was. Whether it was Cassie, whether it was Kim or whoever. Yeah.
Gina, whoever it was.
But I do think it was some of that going on. I think two things can be true. I think some of these hundreds of people who's submitting these lawsuits, all of them not lying. Some of that stuff is true.
I would say that too, but I would also tell you, I'm also wary about the time frames, because of the fact that Diddy had a good swath of assistants that worked with him, except for during that time when he was with Mia, when he only had that one assistant. So I would say in that particular time in that year that he had that one assistant, maybe. But Diddy had such, even though he wouldn't say that they were competent, he had very competent assistants that were able to do the things that they needed to do for him so he can be in so many different places. Now, I agree. There could be 2 and 3 things at once, but the way Cassie explained the time frame and how they was woe out in there and having to take IVs and all kinds of stuff.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. 2 and 3 days at a time. Unless he was having the party, and unless, I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't think that 100 and plus some people had that type of experience. 10, 15, maybe 100 and something. You would have heard about 100 and something people in an experience, just like we heard about what was going on, what we thought about. There should have just been, I don't know. I think
it was different experiences, because think about Mia's testimony. Think about her testimony. I'm just in the bed, sleep, and he on top of me. So I don't think they necessarily had the freak off experience, but I do think Puffy was out here violating people.
Okay, but I think that's what I mean by, and I think what Pam is also saying, these parties, the party thing, the coming in, laying on me and her waking up, what she said, in a chair or something like that. Like, yeah, Puffy might have been on some other predatory stuff, extracurricular outside of the freak offs. Not saying, I'm just talking about as far as Jaguar Wright was like, I'm saving people from the Diddy parties. Like, okay, Jag.
And that's why everybody had all these big bets about, oh my gosh,
who gonna show up?
Was at Bishop Jakes was at the thing, and all of these people were there. And I don't know about that. They may have been at the white parties, they may have been in the thing, and they wherever that was, he had them big beds on the outside. They may have been laying up in all those things, but I'm just not seeing these orgy-esque levels of freak offs.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And even some of the, like, saying working 20 hours. I mean, I stay up late and work hard, especially if I'm getting in trial mode, but 20 hours, what I'm saying? It's only 24 hours in a day, and then like the IVs, like you said, you get 100 people doing then it seems like more of it gets out, but these aren't people I'm running around with, so maybe
and that would be real hard to contain. Like, that's I don't know, that's a lot to try to contain, and I don't think he had. I don't think his staff was that big to contain something like that. I'm pretty sure he had a nice staff, but to contain it, like sooner or later down the chain, somebody talking. This would have been out on some real, stuff early than what we getting it. It would have been out.
People have been talking.
No, I ain't talking about like that. I mean, as far as on some somebody needs to go to jail. Like I'm telling the police, or because I don't rock that way, Diddy, and I'm 100th on the totem pole. I don't get down like that. Something like that. That's what I mean by getting out.
I know. Where's the video? You know what I'm saying? Like you got that many people.
He kept videos on the FOs. So I'm quite sure he would love to have had a visual evidence of his intimacy of body touching and baby oil and baby oil pools and Astroglide and heels.
But see, that's the stuff that the prosecution is doing just to embarrass him, because baby oil is not illegal. You know what I'm saying? And Astro, what you call it, Astro oil? That ain't it. That stuff is not it. So you Billy, like people in drug cases, they'll say, "Oh, this dude." And most of my clients, they're not dealers. They get charged with dealing, but they're not. They're just users. And the prosecutors will bring in, look at all this. Look at all this he had like a pound of this or whatever. It's like, okay, well, during the pandemic, look, I'm not a distributor of toilet paper, but we had a lot of toilet paper that we bought. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So sometimes people that use drugs, they buy it in bulk.
Because they can't go nowhere.
Yeah.
Or they want to go on a bender or something like that. I'm going on a bender.
Don't mean they're a dealer. And so, hey, he's got all this baby oil, not illegal, and he wants to use it for, his FOs, then go ahead, as long as it's consensual. But they just making that, they just embarrassing him with that. Even my mom was talking about that.
But that's how they got, but that was it, right? That's how they set up this whole thing from the jump. That perp walk, when they showed the day, coming in, they probably knew Diddy had all that stuff in there. Oh, you want to turn yourself in? Not today, brother. We coming in the day before. We're going to catch you with all this stuff, and we're going to perp walk you with baby oil and Astroglide and used condoms and ketamine and all. It's like, dang. They said it. I mean, they set him up. They got him good.
What about this statement right here?
It's true.
A person who is impaired, whether by drugs, alcohol, or any condition affecting judgment, cannot legally consent to sexual activity. Impairment voids consent. Cassie and Mia didn't consent under the law.
Yeah, in Indiana, that's true. If the person is unaware, so right, if someone uses some alcohol or drugs, that doesn't mean that they are intoxicated, right? So they would have to be intoxicated, that they could not give consent, and that would be true. Like if you give
the point of impairment,
those roofies or whatever, those kind of things, and that or someone drank so much that they pass out.
Because if that's the case, having a beer, you done you can't consent off of one beer. Then if that's the case,
but what if both people are impaired?
Right, and if both people are impaired, then what? You know what I'm saying? Is that just does the consent cancel each other out?
Because the tie always goes to the woman. You know that.
Both
people are impaired.
So the woman is still. Intoxication is not a defense, right? Unless it's involuntary intoxication. So if someone drugs you, and you don't know it, then then you could use that as involuntary.
No, if somebody drugs you and you don't know it, obviously that's wrong.
Right.
What if both people are drunk? They have sex. She shows up and says there was no consent because I was drunk, but he was drunk also. But usually, what I've seen is that doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Intoxication is not a defense. So the male cannot say, "Hey, I was intoxicated. I didn't know what I was doing," because involuntary intoxication in Indiana, anyway. I can't speak about where this is in New York, but in Indiana, voluntary intoxication is not a defense. So you can't say, "Hey, I was intoxicated. I didn't know what I was doing," and use that as an excuse, unless obviously it was involuntary when someone drugged you didn't know.
Breathe air and call it a day. That's all you can do. Drink water and breathe air.
That's it.
Prosecutors claim Diddy paid $100,000 to a security guard for the surveillance footage, a signed agreement barring the guard from speaking. This is evidence of obstruction of justice
and bribery. That's why I said there's no way he can beat RICO. They got this man twisted every which way.
I don't know if that's obstruction of justice at the time. I think it would be a stronger obstruction of justice if the trial was going on, then he paid paid them to do that and bribe him and all that kind of stuff like that. But if you're just saying, hey man, here's some money, don't show this video to anybody, and there's not an investigation going on, then that may not necessarily be obstruction of justice. I know that may be what the government's going to use and probably going to, win the day, obviously. But, I think I can make arguments like, hey, this was something embarrassing, and, and I'm just paying this dude to, get rid of that tape, and,
That's definitely going to be his defense, Mr. Defense Attorney.
But the thing about that is the person who got the money, who we say have the money, we hadn't talked to him yet. The security guard just testified
why didn't they show up when the guards first came?
Because it's the way they are weaving this thing. That's why I said way they're weaving this case together. I don't know if the average person is kind of following it. I'm following it. I see exactly what they're doing.
Because I think they rest Wednesday.
Yeah.
I think they rest Wednesday. Yeah.
No, they got another.
No, we haven't got to the chef. We haven't got to Jane Doe. No.
Yeah, I heard that it's going to be an 8-week trial, and we're going into week 4. So that was scheduled to, although they're cutting some witnesses.
But, I think they're going to rest early. I think it's going to be an early rest.
They still got Mia on Monday. We still haven't got to the chef. We still haven't got to Jane Doe. We still ain't talked to KK. No. They got at least
one who not showing up. It's a witness not showing up, right?
Victim 3.
Victim number 3.
And there's also not been a lot of finance stuff either. Like, I think they're going to get into some financial,
at the end.
Well, if anything, I would say this the last week. That's what I'm calling it. I'm calling it last week. Put me down.
You got too many witnesses. You got too many
witnesses. The prosecution said that only thing the prosecution said that they feel like they may take only 5 weeks. Now remember, we're going.
They lost victim 3. They lost victim 3, so they probably,
they're not going to call those people for her. Because remember, the first week was just jury selection. So we've only had the second week, the third week, and we're in the 4th week. So we've only had 3 weeks of their testimony. They still have 2 more weeks.
Okay.
They still have that, according to what they're saying.
Right.
They still have 2 more weeks.
Because you got to bring the finance in. You have to bring the finances in. And there's still, at least that I know, is the chef and Jane Doe 2. And I think you got to bring KK in because she's not charged. I think you have to bring her in. She is right in the middle of everything.
I need you to bring HR in. I need human resources to come in. Because human resources is cutting up in regards to, because he calls and says, well, then we just going to suspend her for insubordination, and we gonna suspend her without, I need HR. I need to see them ladies and gentlemen in HR to see what's going on.
That's why I said the way they're weaving this, everybody keeps talking about chef for a reason. If y'all notice, these witnesses start talking about people before they show up. I'm like, bro, the way they're doing this is so wild. But yeah, chef is coming, and Jane Doe too.
She needs to come because I am curious about her and her relationship, because you had one assistant that went to blows with her, and then you have Puffy that supposedly went to blows with her, and then you have the same chef, from my understanding, told on Capricorn Clark. So I'm interested in her.
She hates Puff. She hates him.
She may, but like I said, when she told on Capricorn Clark, she left a bad taste.
And there's 2 chefs. I don't know which chef told on Capricorn Clark, because there's one chef who sued him because she said he made her serve him during his intimate moments. So there's one chef that sued him, and then there's Chef Jordan, who I think is gonna be the one who he kicked out of the house. He put hands on her.
Yeah.
And she wasn't playing with him. She would cuss him out. So yes, I think she's coming.
You know who I would love to see they put on trial that Mia mentioned? Who was this Kayla woman that apparently she went to HR because she saw Puff put hands on Cassie? And he was telling her about, well, you may have to testify. And if you testify, you need to make sure that you testify for me. And then it's supposed to be Capricorn Clark, because Mia then kind of corroborated what Capricorn Clark said about, and if Capricorn is going to sue, you're going to have to testify for me and make sure that you stand up for me, or something like that. It was something in the testimony. So, yeah. Anyway.
Was this after everything went down, or right before everything went down with Cassie? About the test, who would have to testify?
I don't know. Mia mentioned this incident with someone named Kayla, and Kayla went to HR. And then I think Kayla had threatened to sue, or she did sue. I don't know exactly. I can't remember what that testimony was. And then Mia testified that she was on some kind of call with HR and KK and Diddy and all of them. And they were saying, you know, you're going to have to make sure that you were basically saying you're going to have to make sure, because it was just before she was talking about D-Rock calling her back in April or whenever that was. She was saying that there was a testimony.
Yeah, right before that was right when the stuff was going out about Cassie suing Diddy and all of that, and they said the feds were sniffing around. I think it was right around that time.
It was somewhere in there, but there's some lady named Kayla that filed a lawsuit, and they were talking about it. That's why I was saying I want HR, whoever is part of that Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Entertainment HR. I want HR to come up because of the fact that they were having some kind of conference call, Zoom meeting, whatever call they were having back in 2017, 2018, right before she gets fired. They're having some kind of call, and he's saying, you know, you're going to have to do that with her and possibly Capricorn as well. I can't get over. I have to go look it up, but I just remember saying that. That's why I kept saying, I want HR. I want to hear what this was going on in regards to HR, because to me, that kind of puts, I'm thinking that does something with RICO, maybe with obstruction, maybe with something where he was tampering with somebody. I don't know. I'm just saying. I just remember that conversation.
Oh, yeah. They're going to get him for witness tampering, too, because he called Jane Doe on the phone and she recorded him. I don't know if the recording going to be allowed to be played, but as soon as Cassie sued, he called her. Hey, everything we did is cool, right? You straight? What you need? Anything we can do? Same thing with Mia. Diddy done was wilding, but
and I think that's possibly why he couldn't get bond like he wanted to, get bail like he thought he was going to.
Yeah, that's what they said. It was because of that.
Right.
That's what they said.
All right, people. Do we have any closing? I'm about to say
closing arguments.
Any summations? Anything you want to present or talk about at the end, or do you want to give what your predictions are at this point? Do you think Diddy is gone, or do you think there's still some hope at the light of the end of the tunnel? There might be some mysterious witness, like his mama will get up and say, "No, my baby didn't do it. I did."
Yeah, everybody mama gonna get up and say that, right? Not my baby. No, I think I think Diddy cooked, man. I think they about to serve Diddy up, man. Short of a mistrial or some kind of, it will have to be something crazy to happen for Diddy to walk on this. But it will be that'll be crazy. If all the, I ain't even going there yet. But yeah, he done. He cooked.
Look, with Diddy, I wouldn't be surprised if a mistrial happens. I would not be surprised if it's one juror in there like, nope, not gonna do it. If you follow the law of the land, like, this man is gone. But yeah, I would not be surprised if there's a mistrial.
Speaking of that, for those of those bloggers and everybody that was in the courtroom this last time when the defense was grilling Mia, they were talking about, they were looking at the jurors and things like that, and they feel like there's at least 4 jurors that they look like have swayed themselves. There was 2 going in that was Diddy, but there were 2 more that they felt like had come around to Diddy's side. So I just wanted to mention that. But go ahead, Lauren.
I think this is over. I think this ended the minute that Mia hit the stand. It's probably over a little bit before that, because you got other people coming too that are going to say generally the same thing. I actually do think there is a fair chance that President Trump could pardon him, because they do know each other. And President Trump has a particular thing for pardoning Black men. I really think primarily because he doesn't want everybody to, even though he doesn't want to admit this, he doesn't want everybody to think that he's just going to pardon a bunch of white dudes. And it is something that he's done before. Kwame Kilpatrick, to me, is his most interesting Black pardon, because Kwame Kilpatrick was going to be in there for a long time on some corruption stuff in Detroit, and then he pardoned him. So I don't think that that's as crazy as it may initially sound, particularly on these types of charges, because Trump feels a certain sense of, quote, this happened to me, although obviously different cases, E. Jean Carroll and just different situation, but still he feels a sense of there's injustice and there's lawfare. And so I'm just going to say that I think he's definitely going to get convicted. But we should be very aware. We should get the graphics package ready with Donald Trump in the corner and Diddy on the other side, because you never know what Donald Trump might do. He also, as I think a narcissistic personality, he likes to project that I can control everything in this world. I can control justice. And I think this is like the perfect thing to do when you have this type of charge, these many charges, and I can prove that I'm more powerful than the justices. It's a perfect thing for him to get involved in. So I'll leave it there. I think he is going to get convicted, no question. And I don't think the jury is going to be out for days and days and days. It would have to be one juror in there that really, says, okay, I'm gonna, I think this is all crazy. I just don't think that's gonna happen. So I think he's gonna get convicted.
And plus, they have talked about Trump and hip hop for so long time. So I guess, Trump thinks he's hip hop.
And there is a connection there. I mean, he did, hang out with hip hop guys. I mean, so it's like, it's not like it's just totally out of nowhere, but right. There's so many photos. If you see the photos online, it's pretty interesting. They were at the same types of events. I just think that's on the table. That's on the table.
Yeah. And he just pardoned. Didn't he just pardon one of Snoop Dogg's friends?
Yeah, he pardoned Harry O. Last time he was in, it was Harry O., who was the founder, one of the co-founders of Death Row Records. So yeah.
And I think the bigger the pardon, the more powerful. It's all about him, of course. So the bigger the pardon, the more powerful Donald Trump looks. I would just be aware that could happen.
So, Mark, but I saw this was directed at you, so I decided to put it on the screen, and you can kind of incorporate that in your summation.
Yeah, that statement there in quotation, I didn't catch that particular statement, but if that is the correct statement, I do see where that could be trouble for the defense as a slip up, because it's saying as many times as you just said. So, who cares if it was one time or 100 times? That means that, that it did happen. And that's something that happens at trial. You get in there, you start talking. I mean, it's real time, and you get in there, you start saying things, and sometimes you slip up and you don't know it until you actually read what was said. It's like, oh, I said that, or I didn't say that. I should have objected. And the trials it is tough, but it's easy to sit back and kind of second guess and, look at a cold record and see all that after. But when you're in the moment, you got all this stuff going at you. Believe me, I know how that is. I will say with that also comes with, you never know what a jury's going to do. I do think that just because they're painting such a bad picture on him, that he will probably get convicted of all the charges. I don't think he's going to testify, but the jury, you just never know what they're going to do, because I've won cases I thought I was going to lose, and then lost cases I thought I was going to win. So you just never know. I do agree with Lauren that the type of this kind of case, because Trump seems to go after like financial crime type of things he can relate to when it comes to pardons, and he's already kind of put that out there that he might do it. And I think he likes to do this stuff because these people have a lot of money, and he thinks, okay, they'll give back to my campaign, they'll bring in other Black people. So this is the kind of case I could see him actually giving a pardon to. And for now, those are all my predictions.
All right. Well, I'm gonna tell y'all this. I think that the government has at least proven the crossing the state lines to do getting flued out. That's what I think they've done. The drugs, I think that he's had a copious amount of drugs, and assistant after the assistant has said, I procured the mood enhancers for not only just Puff, but other people who was in his parties for him. So I see that. I think that he may possibly those particular things. I am interested to kind of see where the prosecution rests. Because they've lost victim. What was it? Victim number 3. So I'm curious to see who they rest. I'm curious to know who they don't call, but who I would love to hear from them call. Number one, I want to hear HR. I want to hear HR. I don't think Diddy. I think if Diddy testifies, they're gonna have to be prosecuted. I mean, excuse me, the defense is gonna have to ask the judge, can they bring somebody in to put the Beijing and all this other stuff? Because I see Diddy coming in, dancing in, being Diddy. Take that. I didn't do it. Y'all gotta believe me. Do like his video did. Man, I was just messed up, but I didn't do all of that. I made something, but I didn't do all of that. So I think I'm curious. I want HR. I want HR. I want HR. I do think the financial records is going to bring out something. And also I need one of those bodyguards, from the D-Rocks to the Uncle Polly,
Roger
the Nolan,
Bond.
Roger Bond. I need a bodyguard, because the bodyguard.
Lauren, we can't hear you if she's talking.
I think she's on the phone with somebody.
Yeah. I think that's going to happen. I don't know why, when you talk about a mistrial, I don't know why, because from what the people were talking about in the jury, I think Diddy is watching those jurors, and since those jurors are out and about in the streets and they haven't been what do you call that? Sequestered. Since they haven't been sequestered, I'm thinking some brown paper bags are about to be strewn around pretty soon.
He did it in the Sean case. That's how he got out that Sean case.
Why not? Why not? I mean, they already trying to hit you with obstruction anyway. Might as well obstruct. Let's go.
I think some little brown paper bags are going to be strewn around.
Hey, why you think victim 3 gone?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was the easy one too. She was always to pick me, so it was easy to go ahead and slide her something and say, "Baby, when I get out, it's me and you against the world." Yeah.
Who you think 3 was? Do you think that was Miami?
I know it's Gina Hunt. I know it's Gina. 1000%. You know how I know it's Gina? The judge messed up and told us about a month ago. There was a motion put in, and the judge said something along the lines of, since victim 3 has already done a public interview. I'm like, oh, well, we know who that is. Yeah. That's Gina.
Right.
That's Gina. And then when her lawyers put in a motion, because she's always in competition, when Cassie said, I'm gonna speak my name, her lawyers put in a motion and said, my client wants to speak her name too. I said, boy, these two here, Gina and Cassie. So that's why it was weird when it's like, we got a motion that she's gonna testify in her name, and then 2 weeks later, y'all can't find her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I mean by people on the internet are better reporters than the quote legacy media that is out there, because I mean, once again, I've learned more from people who are following this casually. I mean, I wouldn't say casually, but just following this as non-quote reporters. I mean, I find out more information and more detail than from the people who are reporting on this. Like, it's just like the dude Inner City. I mean, I guess he's a reporter, but he looks to me like just a dude, and he's just texting us real-time stuff. So once again, I'm learning more from folks like Tina and so many others. It's just so funny.
That was crazy when I saw that motion. I'm like, oh, that's definitely Gina. Oh, because his lawyer messed up in December and was like, this case is crazy. These are all his ex-girlfriends. So I'm like, okay, we already know it's his ex-girlfriend. And then when the judge said, victim 3, because they was trying to hide something from her. And he was like, well, victim 3, she's already done a public interview per your blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh, there's only 2 of his ex-girlfriends that's done public interviews, Young Miami and Gina Hun. And I knew it wasn't Young Miami because she been outside too much. I'm like, it's Gina. It's Gina. Because victim 3, it was in the documents. She testified about how he just beat her senseless. And Gina talked about that in the interview, stomped the baby out of her. So that was they really wanted her, but she was always
and one of the assistants talked about that, because he testified that Diddy was chucking apples at her in a way so forceful that it was like, he was meaning to try to hit her and hurt her with those apples.
He had them in competition, her and Cassie. They look just alike. He had them pitted against each other. That's why Cassie didn't like her.
Yeah, they are kind of similar. Now that you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, he probably thought he hit one. He probably thought he was hitting the other one.
Awesome. All right, people. Thank you all so much on the panel. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Tina. Thank you,
Thanks.
Blue.
Yep,
Y'all,
yep.
we do this every week. I'm going to be assembling a panel for next weekend as well. Same time, same channel. Y'all, please tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker. Tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. And as always, people, bye-bye.
Bye. Nice meeting everybody. Take care. Have a good weekend.